session of the Edina Planning Commission. Carrie, if you could please take the roll.
Commissioner Hobbs.
Here.
Commissioner Olson.
Here.
Commissioner Carr.
Here.
Commissioner Forrest.
Here.
Commissioner Thorson.
Here.
Commissioner Strauss.
Here.
Commissioner Nemiroff.
Here.
Commissioner Ma.
Here.
Commissioner Kivimaki.
Here.
And Chair Platter.
Here. Thank you, Carrie. So the first item tonight is the approval of the meeting agenda. Are there any changes or proposals different for that? There's 2 public hearings tonight.
Correct.
Seeing none, I'd take a motion to approve.
Move approval of the meeting agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Do I have all those in favor say aye? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next up, the approval of the meeting minutes. These are the meeting minutes from the October 28th Planning Commission. Are there any changes or modifications to those minutes? Commissioner Nemiroff.
There's just in one spot on the second page under public hearing, Acting Chair Carr's last name was spelled incorrectly.
Thank you.
I heard it was a very, very tight meeting too. Very efficient meeting, I understand too. Anything else? With that, I'd take a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So next up are public hearings. There's 2 tonight. The first one up is a variance for 4004 Lynn Avenue. And Planner Teague will be presenting tonight. He's here by himself, taking notes as well, I hope.
I'll do the best I can. Okay, thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. This first public hearing is for a variance request up in the Morningside area at the 400 block of Lynn, just south of the St. Louis Park border, 40th Street. The site exists today with this 1.5 story single-family home, as you see on the screen. What the applicant would like to do is remove that half story and build a full 2nd story above, so that there's also an addition that goes off the back. The variance that's being requested is just off the front of the building. So what they're proposing to do, so again you can see the half story, and they're proposing this would be what the home would look like. And to meet the required setback, they could build the 2nd story addition, but it would all be flush to the house with the exception of the porch. So they're looking to get a little articulation into the front of the building. So the portion that requires the variance is this area right here as it sticks out the front. Again, it's just for the 2nd story. So here's a look at the survey. The required setback is established by the 2 homes on either side. So in this case, the required front yard setback is 39.75, and the proposal here is 38.9. So it's just this green strip that encroaches into the required setback. Our code allows an 80 square foot encroachment, a porch type addition. So this porch that comes out into the setback does conform to the ordinance. So the variance that's requested is just for that green area there. So in this case, staff does believe that the variance criteria are met. Practical difficulty is the location of the existing home. The footprint stays the same in relation to the homes on either side. As you can see, they pretty well line up with each other. The encroachment is for a minor, just a 1-foot encroachment into the setback. Again, that porch does comply. Staff believes that the addition is reasonable. It's consistent with the character of this area, and that 1-foot encroachment allows for some articulation to the home. So with that, staff is recommending approval subject to the findings and conditions that are outlined in the staff report. And I can stand for questions.
Any questions for Planner Teague? Commissioner Carr.
Just a quick question. So the variance is for the portion that juts out a foot, and that's the same width as the front porch on the lower level?
Correct.
And then have you received any comments from adjoining neighbors?
Yes, and they were included in your packet. I believe they were from residents that live over on Monterey on the other block.
Yeah, there's 2 letters that I saw in there.
Thank you.
Carrie, I had a question. If you go to the compliance table on page 2, it's on lot coverage. It says proposed lot coverage is 28.27. Now, is that what exists today, or are they increasing the square footage? I was unclear.
There is an expansion, so I may have to do some quick checking to see if they're code compliant, because they are building an addition off the back. And there are some notes on the survey.
So that would need if that's true here, that would need a variance then for the lot coverage as well, right?
Let me check my code to make sure
Okay.
that's code compliant, because the variance isn't written up with a lot coverage variance. We're typically really hard on those lot coverage
Yeah, that's what I'm
variances,
asking.
so
That's
let
why
me
I'm-
check that. It might be a 30% requirement here. It might be a typo in the
Okay.
table.
Commissioner Forrest.
So you said there's 80 square feet allowed for the porch,
Correct.
and the measurements there are 87, around 87 square feet. So I'm wondering if,
Well, they've
is that
stepped.
because it has to do with where it's set in the setback, or?
Yeah, they've stepped it in. It's 4.2 feet wide here, and then it juts out halfway. I'm assuming that's to meet the 80,
Okay.
the 80
I
square
see that.
feet. So, it's not
I see
5
the
all
jet
the way
now.
across.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was wondering.
Any further questions?
I'll
Okay,
check that.
Abby, you can check that out. So would the applicant like to make a presentation? Okay, that's fine. We'll wait for Carrie to, sorry to put you on the spot, but. While he's doing that, I think we could probably do the public hearing. So this is a public hearing, so if anyone wants to come forth, you have, come to the microphones here, you'd have about 3 minutes. Little green buttons on there to watch, and when it goes to red, your 3 minutes are done. Was there anyone that wants to speak on this? Seeing none, I'd take a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close public hearing?
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Okay, I did find it. It is a typo. The lot coverage requirement is 30% because this lot is less than 9,000 square feet. So the coverage is code compliant.
Okay. As Carrie mentioned, we don't really ever grant those, so I had a question if that was what's going on. Any further discussion, comments, motions?
Motion to approve the variance as outlined in the staff report?
Is there a second?
Second.
So I have a motion, a second. Are there any further comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thanks. So next up is a public hearing. It's a rezoning and comprehensive plan amendment for 3101 66th Street West and 6612 Xerxes. For those of you watching, this is the old Best Buy site at the corner of 66th and York Avenue. I shouldn't say old, it's still there, but closed. Former. Although I think people agree it's old though, right?
Okay, thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. So this site is located, as mentioned by the Chair, this is in the greater Southdale area at the northeast corner of York and 66th. Here, 66th as it comes through, and York. Property is located right on the border of Richfield. Xerxes is the border of Richfield. It's adjacent to Goodyear Automotive here and single-family homes in the city of Richfield. These are guided in the Richfield Comprehensive Plan for medium density, this block and the block to the south, for up to 12 units an acre. The property does include a single-family home. This row of homes here is located in the city of Edina. We did have a development of the old Wicks property, is the 6725. That development included these single-family homes. So these homes have been torn down and are part of that development.
So there'd be 3 left.
So there would be 3 left.
If this
Correct.
goes through.
Yep.
Okay.
So this site is guided in our comprehensive plan for a community activity center. That's the CAC designation. So that includes Southdale, the Galleria, and all the uses that are east of York. Again, the site right up on the top. The property is zoned planned commercial, PCD3, planned commercial district. That's the area highlighted in red. The single-family home holds an R1 zoning designation. The site that you see to the south here in purple, that's the planned unit development district as part of that Lennar project. So what the applicant is proposing to do here is tear down that single-family home and the old Best Buy and construct a 6-story, 210-unit apartment building. There would be a coffee shop located in this area off Southdale Circle. There would be a perimeter sidewalk, boulevard-style sidewalk all around the site. They have provided a connection from proposing a small pocket-type park where that single-family home exists. They've connected that with the sidewalk to the sidewalk along Southdale Circle. So you may recall that they did go through sketch plan a couple of months back. The rendering on the screen is the proposal that they showed at that time. It was generally well received by both Planning Commission and City Council. The applicant has made a number of revisions from that sketch to address concerns by Planning Commission and Council. First has to do with affordable housing. You recall the Planning Commission and Council requested that affordable housing be included in this project. The city recently adopted the affordable housing policy. It became effective November 1st. This plan was applied for before November 1st, so technically it doesn't apply. The applicant still, however, is proposing 5% of the units to be affordable. That would be a total of 10 units toward the city's affordable housing goal with the Met Council. They have provided those pedestrian connections that I pointed out. There was a lot of discussion about connecting that park through the site to York, and they have provided that. They have shifted the driveway entrance here a little bit to the north to there was expressed concern by the city of Richfield in regard to this driveway entrance in proximity to the single-family homes. So they have shifted that to the north, so it's across from the Goodyear. They've added more stone, and especially on that Richfield side, and we'll take a look at that in the slides that are coming up. They've added a podium height on the Xerxes side to, again, address that height issue of 6 stories. And they've also provided detailed response to the Greater Southdale area working principles. Those are included in your packet within their narrative. So this request requires a comprehensive plan amendment. The first is for building height. This site allows 6 stories and 70 feet tall as long as podium height is utilized. They're proposing 6 stories and 75 feet. They are proposing a podium height with that 1-story podium. The applicant has tried to meet that 70-foot height requirement to be in compliance, and they can explain as part of their presentation on just how they've been unable to meet that 70 feet. Housing density in this area, the comprehensive plan allows up to 75 units an acre, and this proposal is for 105. And also, we need to amend the comp plan for that, re-guide that single-family home to include that in the CAC, Community Activity Center. They're also requesting a preliminary rezoning to PUD. So this is a 2-step development review process. This first step, where the Planning Commission is making recommendation to the City Council, This requires 4 votes of the City Council due to the comprehensive plan amendment. Also, preliminary rezoning and preliminary development plan. If the council approves that, they would then come back, the second step, for final rezoning and final development plan and the adoption of the PUD ordinance that would establish that zoning district. That requires 3 votes of the City Council. Staff would then submit the comprehensive plan to the Metropolitan Council for their approval.
Carrie, is this the case where now this would not come back to us for the public hearing again, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Unless we've talked about if there's substantial changes at the City Council or recommendations from the Planning Commission, the council could refer it back.
Okay. Just so everyone here understands that. Also.
Right. In your discussions and review, and if you're recommending a lot of changes, you could even suggest that to the City Council that it come back.
Gotcha.
So just to go into a little bit more detail, again, the boulevard-style sidewalk around the perimeter of the site. Also the pedestrian connection through the site, as you can see it a little better on this graphic, to the sidewalk that was created as part of the Taco Bell project, and that would extend out to sidewalk along York. So there's a lot of green space along here that provides that separation from York. As we've been going through the Greater Southdale Area Working Group, we've talked a lot about this setback from the street to the building and providing a comfortable walking area. We've been talking about up to as much as a 50-foot separation. With this project, and I'll show a graphic here coming up, the distance is about 37 feet in this area here, down to about 30 here. And then it varies, the right-of-way line varies. It's anywhere from 30 to 37 feet separation from the building to the street. So it's not quite that 50 feet that we've just been talking about. We haven't formalized that, but there is a pretty good green space separation here. There was a lot of discussion about the York intersection here with 66th Street. So staff engaged Hennepin County to talk about the possibilities of what could be done to that intersection, especially trying to move pedestrians through that intersection given the development that could occur kitty corner for this site. The county right now is working on improvements to 66th, and they end right here at Xerxes. So we first wanted to find out, are they planning on any extensions into Edina? They don't have any plans at this time. So we did talk about all kinds of possibilities here for the intersection, from a 2-lane roundabout, and it would require a 2-lane roundabout given the traffic volumes that come through here. So when you think about roundabouts, not very pedestrian friendly, but it still is a possibility here. We also talked about the possibility of eliminating the free rights, and they seem to be open to that idea. They did say it's not fatally flawed, so they're open to that idea. So should this project be approved, we're suggesting a condition that they provide some cost sharing in terms of intersection improvements. We did something similar with the 6500 France project and the medical building over there. If there's improvements needed to that 65th and France intersection, that they provide some cost sharing to those improvements. So we would envision something similar should a roundabout go in. In terms of if these free rights are eliminated, we would really just eliminate that paved surface and create more green and public space. Not necessarily for expanding their development, but just providing a more comfortable area from that separation from the building and the street. So that would also be a condition wound into the project. In terms of traffic and parking, WSB conducted a parking and traffic study. Chuck Rickard is here from WSB to answer any questions that you may have in that regard. But their conclusions are that the existing roadways would support the project, and there is adequate parking. WSB is also looking at, they're doing a traffic study for the Greater Southdale area itself. So again, they're examining this whole area. In terms of bike racks would be provided adjacent to the coffee shop, And there's also extensive bicycle parking within the project, and I believe the applicant will go into detail in terms of the bicycle facilities. Landscaping, based on the perimeter of the site, 34 overstory trees are required. They're proposing here a pretty extensive landscape plan with 85 overstory trees and a series of underground landscaping. So it would satisfy our landscaping requirements. All loading and trash pickup would take place inside the parking area. So the way the parking works is it would all be enclosed. The first level would be at grade, and there would be a level below that first grade. So one underground level, one at level that's entirely covered. Access points would be off Xerxes here. This would be the residential access. There would also be residential access off Southdale Circle, and the parking on the first level would be public parking for the coffee shop would be provided in that area. In terms of building material, the applicant has brought a materials board, and they can present that as part of their presentation, but it is a series of stone, metal, and glass. The lighter areas, that's the stone. So just to quickly move around the project, you can see the podium height out along the street. Again, the podium behind the trees, but that's the one story that sticks out. So you can see the stone is the lighter material, stone introduced there. This is the rendering from the Richfield side. So we've got Xerxes here. You can see the pocket park. They've introduced the stone back here and then stone along the podium as well. In terms of rooftop equipment, the applicant has indicated they wouldn't have any equipment that's taller than 3 feet, and that would be located in the center of the building. That can't be visible from the street, so they would have to provide screening. But just given the height and how it's set in from the building, they don't believe that would be visible. So in terms of height, the building again would be 75 feet tall. Our codes do require anytime a building is 6 stories in height, that you need to double the height of the building as the setback from the nearest single-family home. So a 75-foot building would require 150-foot setback from the nearest single-family home. So this graphic shows that. So from the 6-story portion of the building to the nearest single-family home would be an 81-foot setback. And to the nearest home in Richfield, would be 127 feet. As a comparison, the Lennar project, that setback from the 6-story portion to the nearest home is 140 feet. So this is a little bit closer. But again, it is adjacent to commercial area. They've provided that podium height here and the park to try to minimize and buffer that setback moving this way. Again, this is the Richfield Comprehensive Plan. This area here indicates the medium density residential designation for those single-family homes. Again, they see that up to 12 units as the maximum density. So they see this as a transition area into the more intense area in the Southdale area. So this graphic indicates all the different setbacks. The red line indicates the property line. As you can see, it kind of moves in and out. So in general, the setback is 25 feet from the property line along Xerxes. There's about 10 feet of right-of-way here, so it would be about a 35-foot setback to the paved portion of the street. You can see a 50-foot setback to the nearest single-family home to the south, 61 feet to the property line, and again 81 feet to the actual home. Along 66th, a 17-foot setback. This area here is a 20-foot right-of-way from the property line in, so again that would be about a 37-foot green space separation from the building. It would be 28 feet back, the 6-story portion of the building, to the paved portion of the street, and then that continues around 16 feet back from Southdale Circle. In terms of the comprehensive plan density, again, the comprehensive plan sees the CAC as the most intense area in town. The comprehensive plan suggests allowing higher density in this area and floor area ratio, subject to proximity to utility capacities, a level of transit service available. There is a Metro Transit station just across York from the site. Impact on adjacent road. Other desired items to allow greater density include below-grade parking, which this project has, provision of park or open space, affordable housing, sustainable design principles, provision of public art, pedestrian circulation, and podium height. So this project does incorporate most of those things that we're looking for in the comprehensive plan. Also, when comparing densities to some of our surrounding communities, we made the comparison to St. Louis Park and Bloomington and Minnetonka. Some of the development that we're seeing in St. Louis Park, like the West End, some of the densities there up to 110 units an acre. Bloomington has done recent developments, 95 up to 100 units an acre. So this density is within the ranges that we're seeing from our neighboring communities. And again, we would see the re-guiding of that single-family home reasonable, as it's similar to what was done to those homes as part of the Lennar project just to the south. So primary issues for consideration: is the comprehensive plan amendment reasonable, and is the PUD rezoning appropriate? So in this case, in both instances, staff believes that they are reasonable and appropriate. The comprehensive plan, the land uses are consistent in this area. The uses are permitted within the existing planned commercial zoning district, both the residential and the retail. Height is reasonable given the area. It's an expansion from 70 feet to 75 feet. Again, the comprehensive plan recognizes this as the most intense district in terms of uses, height, and coverage. And the traffic study done by WSB says that the roads would support the density increase. In terms of the PUD zoning, staff believes that the PUD criteria is met. It is a mixed-use development. We're introducing more residential into this CAC area, so again, that mixes up the uses. Primarily, this area was residential up to, say, 10 years ago, or was primarily commercial. Again, the pedestrian friendliness of the project, moving residents, or whether it's residents in the building or residents from Richfield, moving them around and through the development. Another concept that we talk about as part of the greater Southdale area study that's going on. Also, providing a place to come to and stay at. Again, with the living quarters proposed, that's a stay at feature certainly. And the park is an area that people could come to and stay at. You've got the coffee shop here. So again, meeting those principles of the working group. Podium height is utilized. They have talked about sustainability principles. I'll let the applicant talk in more detail about that. We would want to seek to get about a 15% energy saving over standard construction. That's kind of a standard condition that we've been putting on PUDs. We would look for that as well. Affordable housing, they are providing 5% of the units. Again, the public realm that I talked about with the sidewalks and the park. One thing I haven't touched on, but we talked a lot about at the sketch plan, is this is a gateway into the Southdale area, and that architecture with the curve provides that gateway signature structure. And we believe that the working principles of the Southdale area are met here. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the project subject to the findings and conditions that are outlined in your staff report. And with that, I can stand for any questions.
Teague. Commissioner Olson.
A quick question. With the greater Southdale area, can you remind me where they're talking about the densities and the height with that piece? I know we just had that meeting last week, but I can't remember specifically what they were talking about at the northern part of the study area, if this is where they're envisioning the higher density.
Yeah, we haven't touched on specific densities in the area. He's creating that model. He didn't do anything for this side yet, so we haven't seen that piece as of yet.
Okay, all right.
Commissioner Nemiroff.
Thank you for a thorough presentation, Carrie. I have a few questions regarding the engineer's report. And I might have other questions later about traffic, but Is there a conclusion, when reading the engineer's report, is there a conclusion to that? In other words, is everything good, or are there any hanging open items that need to be resolved other than a developer's agreement?
Yeah, I don't believe so. So the watershed district is our regulatory review agency in terms of the grading and drainage, so it would be subject to their review, and if they have any conditions, that would also be included. But engineering hasn't highlighted any significant concerns with this.
Okay. One item that I was wondering about that's sort of referenced in the engineering report is number 10, verify fire demand and hydrant locations. They're asking if the existing hydrant off York will be staying. And so I had a separate question, which might be more just general, which is at what level, at what height of a building do we have increased concerns that need to be reviewed by the fire department?
I don't know those specific codes, but I can tell you when we get development projects like this in, I bring all of the staff together with engineering, building department, fire, police. Fire department was at this meeting. They didn't outline any significant concerns. Sometimes if they have a concern, they'll provide a memo for me. But their comments were we can work out hydrant locations, where the Y connections and some of those things happen on the building at the time of a building permit. So they didn't identify any concerns at this time.
Okay, I'll hold. I might have some questions on traffic, but I'd like to hold for now and let others have an opportunity if they have questions.
Our building official report it mentions type 1 construction. Could you tell us what that is?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know the detail of, I'm not an expert on the building codes.
We both have traffic questions, and so, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, go first.
Well,
Sure, we could
Do we
invite
want
Mr.
WSB
Rickard
to
up
come
too.
up?
Sure.
okay.
What did you have for now for Carrie?
I do for
Yeah.
One of the things we've been talking about on the Greater Southdale Work Group is the width of the sidewalks and how the traditional sidewalk is not conducive to people really walking and enjoying the walking experience. Do you know what the width of these sidewalks is?
Yeah, I believe these are 8 feet.
Sidewalks are
8 feet? Yeah, 8 feet.
8 feet?
That's, I think, consistent with our standards for the sidewalks that we're putting in along France from our engineering department. I know we've been talking about wider. We haven't instituted any of that as of yet. So for now, it's consistent with the standards that we've been requiring.
Okay, because, I know the consultant is recommending 15 feet width for sidewalks, so that's just something to keep in mind. And the other thing is the materials for the sidewalk. Again, variation in that material might be of interest instead of having it just all concrete. Maybe some stamped concrete or bricks, but that would be something else that I think might add some variety because that's a long, long sidewalk. Could be dull.
Yeah, that would be a condition that you could certainly add. We don't have in this area, this could be setting the precedent for the type of sidewalk that we're going to see on this side of York.
Right.
We have that certain type that we've been putting in down by the Byerleys, so that's a good suggestion.
The other thing is I just wanted to make sure, I believe those trees are on the boulevard side of the sidewalk, not next to the building, they're on the boulevard side, is that correct?
Correct, yeah, so you'd have some trees on both sides, so that would be within the county right-of-way, so we would have to work with the county to okay that.
Okay, again, I think that's important to stipulate that the trees be on the boulevard side, because again, that's more conducive to a pedestrian environment. And then do we have a visual of the parking for the cafe? You said that I can see the overhead visual, but something from the side that would show what it would look like from the side visually.
Yeah, I don't have anything unless the applicant has something new that they haven't submitted as part of the packet.
Okay, I mean, it's facing south. You said one level was below ground and one level is at ground. The other level is above ground, I believe, or maybe you said it was enclosed. So I just think it would be interesting to see what that parking area looked like.
Yeah, so this rendering is probably the closest we get to it. The entrance would be this location here, so you can kind of see it's at grade. So parking would be within this area here, extended to the north. So that would be the parking deck that would access the coffee shop. And there would be one level of parking below that.
Okay, and then looks like there's just one long wall there. You see where that person is? Where you again were showing me, it looked like an unarticulated wall on that side.
Oh, yeah,
That wall.
This one might show it.
Yeah,
best.
right there. But that wall there, that long wall right there.
So that's parking behind it.
Okay.
So parking underneath this. But
Do you
that's a
know-
good suggestion. That might be something that we
Next
want
to the Taco Bell.
Right. Here's
We've
the
had some
Taco Bell.
experience with these long walls that do not look very attractive. So I don't know if there's a way to articulate that, add some transparency to it. I think that would make it more attractive because, again, it's facing an open area there.
Certainly, that's a good suggestion.
And I just was in Washington, D.C. recently. This is more for the city's benefit. They have sidewalks, well, they have at their intersections, the markings for the pedestrians are huge. Even though these are very small streets, they're 4 times as wide as we currently are right now in terms of walking, and they have them on every side, every cross section there. So just to keep in, that's another way of making that intersection more pedestrian friendly, is not sticking with our traditional, I don't know what it is, 5-foot wide pedestrian white marking, but make that much bigger because cars see it. You can have more than 2 people crossing at a time. It just makes it way more pedestrian friendly. And then you mentioned that there was going to be cost sharing for that intersection and improvements. Has that percent been set yet, or the dollar amount been set yet?
No. Engineering department has done those calculations in the past, and we don't know exactly what's going to happen to the intersection. So don't know how that would break down.
All right. Thank you.
Carrie, can you go back to the overall site plan? Maybe that one, or even is there a larger one with this showing the city, the lots to the north? Yeah, maybe that one. So I guess what I'm asking here is what's the longer term city vision for this area? Is the 6525, is that in Edina or is that in
That
Richfield?
is, that's Edina.
That's Edina. Kind of these 4 corners here, it's because we're coming into a situation where we're lots of residential in here, and it's just a crazy intersection. So how is I guess the city, in my mind, the city really needs to be thinking about how we get pedestrians around this area, this intersection. If this comes to pass, and then the tightest building, there's something for that. So I don't know how I could say the city needs to step on it as far as the infrastructure here, because I don't want to be putting these in a spot and then not having people use it to get around. I mean, when we do this, and I'm sure the Southdale group is looking at that, but what's the vision and how do people get around here? And again, we're kind of back to the creating islands type of thing, and not that this is a bad thing here, but I'm worried, I'm concerned about how people, that they're just, again, back to I'm here, I'm going to drop in my car to go to Southdale, I'm going to hop in my car to go to Cub Foods or whatever, because there's not a nicest way to get through here. So I have a big concern from that standpoint. I'd really put that back on the city, and how is the city going to step up, not just for this project, but what's happening here, and look at that infrastructure sooner than later. Do you have any comments to that?
I do, yeah, and that's precisely what, we heard the sketch plan discussion, both planning commission and council wanted that question answered, so that's why we started the discussions with the county. We really do want to develop a plan here for this area and moving pedestrians around. That should drive whatever design happens here at the intersection.
Yeah.
As far as what we have visioned, when we talked about the sketch plan for the site over here, Kitty Corner, we talked about re-guiding all these corners here to the CAC. So we see all three of those corners as kind of the gateway into the city. And I think the design of this intersection would play right into that. And that's why we wanted to, our main objective here is pedestrian movements, and that's when we talked about the roundabout, and the thinking was, well, roundabout might not be the best solution to effectively move pedestrians.
Necessarily slow down for pedestrians to get through. I like roundabouts.
It does slow the traffic down.
Slows the traffic down, but there's really no stop then for pedestrians to get across, or not easily. So it's have its pluses and minuses. So that's I guess kind of a broader comment I have, and I guess it's nothing we've probably not talked about before, but it's really getting concerning to me that these are all coming in and we're sometimes not seeing the larger vision that needs to be here and addressing it versus site by site. So those are my comments in general. Commissioner Nemeroff?
Yeah, I had a couple of comments. First of all, I agree with everything you said. And I do remember when the developers for the Titus group were in front of us a few weeks ago, they almost seemed eager to talk about a bigger vision for the pedestrians. And I'm wondering if there's any way we can facilitate something along those lines would be great. I did want to ask a question of Commissioner Carr that's related to the sidewalk discussion we're having, though, and that's about the width of the sidewalks. Does it make a difference if the sidewalk is right next to the street versus next to a boulevard?
Well, you mean in terms of the width?
Yeah, like psychologically, if I'm walking on an 8-foot sidewalk next to a street, I don't necessarily feel like I'm on an 8-foot sidewalk because I'm moving a little bit away from the street. But if I'm in a boulevard, I may feel more comfortable with the full width. And these, I think, are sidewalks are inside of the boulevard, not on the street side, I believe.
Right.
I would agree with that conceptually. Yeah. So we haven't gotten into all the details, but that's one of the things that's been discussed is the width of the sidewalks. But I do think the boulevard helps make it more pedestrian friendly.
Commissioner Carr?
I did have one other question. That's on the park, and that you can just keep it to that visual. The little park that's south, there's the trees. Looks attractive, that pattern there looks. But what is that to the left of the trees? Is that green grass? Right there, yes.
I'm not sure what that's been defined. It might be a question for the applicant.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions for Planner Teague? Otherwise, we can get traffic questions. Don't go far, Carrie. Good evening.
Good evening. Hey, how can I answer your questions?
Apparently, there's some folks that have questions for you. So, whoever wants to go first.
Hi.
Hello.
Can you describe kind of the impact to Xerxes? Because the traffic can't turn south, and I agree with some of the concerns from Richfield residents that a lot of it's going to go on Xerxes, and then I'm also concerned with the parking, overflow parking that might be occurring on that. Let's see. You can start with that. I've got more.
Okay. What we looked at when we looked at the traffic studies, we looked at where the traffic would be generated from, or how much traffic's generated, and that's shown on my table in the traffic study. The site is set up where the two levels of parking are not connected. So looking at the number of parking stalls, about a little over 60% of those parking stalls would access out onto Xerxes, 40% would access out onto, Southdale Circle. So, they are split, there's no connection, and that's, between the two. So there will be a, natural, split that's going to keep some of that traffic, including the coffee shop and any traffic generated from that, on that side of the site and not to the residential side. So looking at that and looking at, kind of a worst case condition of 60% of that traffic coming out to Xerxes, that, is how we generated the traffic that would be impacting on Xerxes. So what we are looking at is in that PM peak hour, about 127 trips that would come out onto Xerxes, and then on Saturday, that peak would be about 156 trips that would come in and out. That's both directions, in and out onto Xerxes. Now, the intersection of Xerxes and Xerxes and 66th is a 3/4 access, so you have that left in, that right out at that intersection. So traffic that's destined that way to the north and to the east would go out that direction. The traffic that would be destined south and west would come south along Xerxes. So we're looking at probably about 3/4 of that traffic. So we're looking somewhere between 80 and 90 PM peak hour trips and a little over 100 Saturday trips that would be added to the existing trips on Xerxes. Does that make sense? Excuse me? Trips a day, there's about...
Yeah, trips a day, and then what's the peak hour right now?
Trips a day, there were about, I better make sure I have the right number. I believe there was about 750 trips a day on that road, and we would be adding a little over 1,000 trips a day onto that. So we'd be more than doubling the trips. Again, some of those would go north. They would just be in that little section to the north, about a third of those. So we'd be about doubling the trips going to the south along Xerxes.
So when you look, and I think there was a part in your report where you were saying that you were assuming that 80% residential has been developed in this area.
80% of the Southdale apartments, that was a number that we received from, planning that 80% of that traffic had already been, or when we did our traffic counts, was already on the roadway. So we added another 20% of the Southdale apartments, across York, in the Southdale lot there, those apartments. That's what I meant by that 80%.
So to the north,
Yep.
west, you added.
That would be the southwest. In the corner of Southdale, that new apartment building that's just out there. That's about 80% occupied.
Okay. Did you also take into account the development that's being proposed to the northwest?
To the northwest. We did not specifically take into account that. We took into account a background traffic growth, that would encompass those, traffic volumes. We included the Lennar development. We did include that in the traffic numbers. And again, that 80% or that 20% of the Southdale apartments, those were included also.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to, because a lot is being proposed around that whole intersection. I'm just kind of concerned if we're looking at each kind of piece and not the cumulative effect.
We try to keep, we try to encompass as much as we can of those other developments, as well as in doing that background traffic growth, which, takes into account just general, traffic growth from the area.
And you still are comfortable that it's going to function okay?
Yes, I am.
Level? Okay.
Commissioner Nemrow?
Thanks. Do we have any, I have a variety of questions, but first of all, do we have any background data that suggests, regarding how long people currently are stuck at stoplights and whether there's, whether that's considered satisfactory or unsatisfactory in that area?
Yeah, as part of the study, you can see in the tables the delay. That is the average delay of a vehicle within those intersections. So that is, for example, the existing, at the intersection of York and 66th, in the existing condition, with the counts that we did, it was at, excuse me here, there's about 34 seconds average delay per vehicle, in that intersection. In the PM peak hour and 29 on a Saturday. So that's how much delay per vehicle. Then if you go to the next page, page 19, you look at the no build condition, which is the condition without this development, and then the build is with this development. Both conditions include the other background traffic, the traffic from the Lennar development, from Southdale, and then that general background, is included in both. So if you look at the 2017 condition, no build is 36 seconds. Doesn't change much with this development at that intersection. As the traffic gets dispersed from this development, the amount of traffic that actually physically would be at that intersection is, less and less as traffic goes out, from the intersection. So, and then we actually looked at that 2030 condition, and we get up to about a 46-second, average delay at that time.
Thank you. I do have some concern basing a decision on average, however, because as a driver, when I sail through an intersection, which I might do much of the time when I'm driving, I don't have a problem, but then I don't keep track of the 10 that I went through at a quick speed. I pay attention to the 2 in which I feel like I'm stuck forever, and then I get really aggravated without thinking how lucky I am with the other ones. So that I didn't have any delays. So, if you average it, I'm pretty good, but it's the 2, and I don't know, do we have any data on what the maximum delays people face today is?
Yeah, and I don't have those numbers with me here, but when we do our modeling of the intersection, it tells us what those peak delays are, what the average delays are. Standard, when we can't design, intersections for that peak delay. Otherwise, we'd have 6-lane roadways, dual left turn lanes in every direction. I mean, the roadways would be huge, if we would end up doing that. So the standard is to look at those average weekday, and we look at the weekend also in this area too, the Saturday, those average delays is what the standard is that we look at.
Okay, thank you. The coffee shop, it shows 37 trips, PM peak, 37 trips in, 37 trips out. So do you believe that those are 37 cars that will be coming to that coffee shop that would not otherwise be traveling on that road?
We looked at that as a worst-case condition.
Okay.
But typically, no. Typically, those would be traffic that's already on the roadway, people that live in the building, so, but we looked at that worst case condition where they would all be new generated traffic. So that we did look at that as the worst case condition.
Yeah, because that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking most people are most of the traffic that's going to go there is going to be people that are already driving along the road and think, oh, hey, this is convenient. I'm really grateful for this. It won't be people going out of their way and adding. And then finally, and thank you very much for your patience, on the PM peak in for the apartments, we are estimating 210 units and 85 trips in and 46 trips out. Is there a rule of thumb that suggests, like you do roughly, say, 33% of the unit capacity is the number of trips in we expect? And then second question, if there is that kind of rule of thumb, does it get adjusted based on the environment? As we were discussing right before you came up, we're concerned that this area is not going to be a drive, park, and walk area. It's going to be a drive, and then you're going to say, oh, I need to go get something for dinner. I'm going to get back in my car and drive a couple blocks south and get my groceries and return. And so I'm, imagining in my head that could be someone drives home, looks in his or her refrigerator and says, oh, I got to get something for dinner, and they immediately drive out, causing 2 peak hour trips. So those are my two questions. One is there a rule of thumb by which you came to the 85? And 2, does that get adjusted depending on the local conditions?
Yes, it is a standard that we look at. The Institute of Transportation Engineers has done surveys across the country, and it's a manual that is so thick that looks at traffic generation from different types of uses. And residential has been studied a lot. So there's a lot of residential type, units. Up in this case, the apartment, unit is what the rate that we use for that traffic generation. And again, based on those studies, so much percent is in, so much percent is out during those peak hours. And there's peak hour of generator, peak hour of street traffic, and apartments, typically they're very close to that same time frame. An example where they would be different is like a school, where the peak hour generator may be 2 to 3 o'clock, where the peak hour street traffic is a little later, so that it's not going to interact with those things. But in this case, the peak hour of generator and street traffic are pretty close to the same. So that's what we'd use those peak hours, based on those studies for that. To answer your question, that if we adjust it for different situations, no, we use those again as average rates that have been studied across the country, and in fact, some of those were in the Twin Cities area that were studied that within that manual. So included in there though would be those multiple trips. So some of those trips are factored in, to that calculation. So,
Thank you very much, Mr. Rickert.
Yep.
What's the level of service on Xerxes and 66th right now for that intersection?
Xerxes and 66 today,
Yeah.
it is overall level service A. The movements are in the PM peak hour. There's that left turn has a little bit of delay. That's at level service C. In the
On the 66th Street?
Yeah, from 66 turning left into the site. That's the one that's the movement that has the most delay during those hours, and that's at a level service C today.
Okay. Any other traffic questions? Commissioner Forrest?
One very general and one just a little bit more specific. Could you speak to us and to the people at home how you would anticipate traffic and or parking being an issue for residential, multifamily residential versus medical office building versus retail? What's going to be heavier? What are some of the unique issues with each of those?
Let me see if I understand you. You want me to compare the parking for each of those types of uses? Is that what you're in?
Just basically because of the changes that are going on in the area.
The residential parking or the residential is a little easier to grasp. You know how many apartment units. You know how many. Typically there's 1-2 cars per unit, so we know that those that how many parking stalls, and those are going to be parking stalls 24 hours a day. Those are going to be something that needs to be available for the entire day. The commercial uses, the office, the medical office, and those are a peaking condition. So you'll see a lot of big vacant parking lots, during those, in the evenings or when those uses aren't in use. So in some cases, we actually look at shared parking. The Byerly site is a good example where, there's residential and commercial kind of in the same area. Some of that overflow into the commercial area can be used by the residential. Just like, at this site with the little bit of commercial that there is there for the coffee shop. I mean, there may be a little bit of overflow between those spots and the spots for the residential there. So there is kind of that shared parking component for those types of uses. Did that answer your question?
I guess what I'm wondering is if indeed, as Commissioner Olson referenced, we end up with another very large residential project on the northwest corner of that intersection. I'm just wondering how that's going to impact things. And as you say, there's peak hours. I'm sure the number of trips are going to be different and stuff, but it's just something, that kind of density that we need to consider. I'm also wondering, when you're talking about, this is going to be mostly residential. The coffee shop is just kind of a very small part of it. So what about visitor parking?
Visitor parking is included in that generation, that parking generation rate that we look at for the site. And the last pages of the report kind of go through what the parking, the requirements based on city code, based on, the Institute of Transportation Engineers has done several studies, that, look at what the demand for these types of uses, is. So if you look at the parking required per city code, it's 219 spaces. So they're well above, they have 271 total, spaces on the site. So they're well above, city code. Based on ITE, it's a little closer. ITE would, require 270 parking, stalls for a demand of this type of a facility. So it's close, but it's still, right at it, right there. And so I feel that in ITE is usually pretty conservative, so their numbers tend to be on the higher side versus the lower side, even with residential.
And again, for people who are watching more than anything, can you speak to that whole Southdale Circle thing? If 40% of the residential units are going to be, or 40% of the parking spaces are going to be exiting onto that and entering off of that, and it's only a one-way out, I think for the whole, both ends of that street, how's that going to be addressed? How should it be addressed?
The right there, the first intersection south of the, and I may have these backwards, but the first intersection south of 66th is a 3/4, so you can make that left-hand turn into the site at that location, or is it the one below? Second? Is it the first one? Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm having a little brain. It's the second one. So it's the second access is a 3/4, the furthest one to the south. So people can turn left into that access as well as turn right out of the site. So the right turn, moving out of the site, this development, the out movement will all be at the first access in this case. People aren't going to drive, around the site to turn right to go back north. They're going to come out and go right and then distribute themselves at 66 left through right, at that point. So that's how they'll come out. The amount of traffic that's coming out, making that turn, there's enough gaps from the traffic coming from the south that they're able to get out, continue to get out with the existing traffic. And again, those levels of service we found were acceptable, with this additional traffic from the site.
And there's no left turn from those? I can't remember. So all exiting traffic will have to go north?
They'll have to go north through the York Avenue intersection, yeah. Okay. Or through the 66th Avenue intersection.
Can you you have these numbers and things, is that on top of what the site generated before, or is this all new traffic that you're speaking of? I mean, that was a retail site where in general retail traffic goes throughout the day, a lot of peak times in there too. I understand it's closed now and I get that, but at the same time there was a functioning site there for a long time. So what percent additional traffic does this site add versus the Best Buy that was there before? Because I think it's a fair question, because this site isn't just all of a sudden putting traffic here. There was something here before that generated traffic also. So I'm trying to understand that, so I think people might hear that all this new traffic, well, there was a busy retail site there. I mean, obviously it wasn't busy enough, but yeah. And what in comparison to what if that site was still retail, if we were proposing let's say a Trader Joe's there or something, how is this different from that, from both peaks and also just generated overall? If you could comment on that, because I don't want people to think that all this traffic just is starting now. There's been a lot here before, and would be more if there was a retail still functioning there.
Yep. Obviously, our background traffic that we counted didn't include it. So, these numbers that you see in this chart are all new traffic.
really the case because there was traffic there before, right?
Exactly. And looking at what was there previously, I asked Carrie, this, and there was the Best Buy site was about 12,500 square feet, around in that range. And if you look at the IT traffic generation rates for those, we're looking about 600 daily trips. So we're adding probably another 2,000 daily trips from the entire site, from the entire site with this development. And in the PM peak hour, we're adding about another 150 trips, versus what would be generated from the existing Best Buy. Now, one of the things, the caveats is that site was, underbuilt as far as what it could, be developed as, as a retail site. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it was about 85,000 square feet?
Yes, yeah, it's a 2-acre site, so you could get about 86,000 square feet there, whether it be retail or medical office.
So if
That
you
would
look at a retail function at that rate, that would generate about, 1,500 trips a day more than this development that we're proposing. So, the retail use, if it was developed to its maximum there, it would generate a lot more traffic than, the residential use.
Would a medical office also generate more traffic?
I didn't run those numbers, but it would be a little bit different. It would be closer to the residential, wouldn't be quite as much as the retail. So
I think that'd be helpful information to have as this goes forward.
Yep.
To understand what was there, what it could be built out to with these other uses versus this.
Yep.
So I think it's a valid comparison for folks when they're looking at traffic. Again, we're not just adding traffic, it's this or that, it's a combination thing.
Yep.
Commissioner Forrest.
Just to follow up on that, didn't the Best Buy site, wasn't the entrance and exit both on 66th?
I believe so.
Yeah.
So all that traffic was on 66.
Right.
I'm sorry, Xerxes. It was all in Xerxes, right?
The accesses are the
66.
same. The accesses are
And
identical to
Xerxes
what
too,
it
so it was
is.
on both sides?
Yep.
Yep.
So it was on both sides?
Yep.
But it wasn't off of Xerxes itself, or was it?
Yeah, it was,
Okay.
I know it was off Xerxes. I driven
Okay.
there.
Yep. It's,
So it's on both sides.
the accesses are identical as far as, one coming out onto Xerxes and one coming out on the Southdale Circle. So they were the same as what they are being proposed.
Is that enough for Mr. Rickard for now? I'm sure you'll stick around, right?
I'll stick around as
Okay.
long as I need to.
Thanks.
Thanks.
So we're finally, assuming the applicants want to give a presentation, right? And I would ask, before we start in particular on the sketch plan pieces and what you've been working on and Carrie touched on a little bit, what changed from the last time? How did you respond to our comments? We want to hear that too, not just the project. So we understand what else is happening here. Come to the microphone. If you want to put things on the table here, Jordan will help you out with that. Otherwise, step to one of the side mics. Wherever you want to be, if you want to use that, but if you're going to show things, you can show them from the top there. So if you want to just stand in the middle, that's fine too.
Yeah, all right. I think,
If you just introduce yourselves and
sorry, my name's Kurt Kremenauer. I'm with Bull Moose Construction and working on the development of this with Pete Keeley. I'm a collage architect. So to address some of the questions he had on what we've done differently from when we first brought in the sketch plan, I think some of the stuff that we've done differently is obviously moving the driveway from the south end of, or the south spot on Xerxes a little further north. Creating, obviously, the walkway around the property. Oh. I'm down to one arm, so I'll let Pete do it.
Yeah, do you want me to run through them, or?
Yeah.
Is there a better way to show it on the screen, other than moving the mouse? Or does that work pretty well? Okay.
So we've adjusted the driveway and moved it further to the north.
Is that where the Best Buy is at right now, or did it move from there?
No,
Do you
we
know where-
moved it from there.
Okay.
It's actually, if you can see this line right here, I know it's very, very faint. That is the southern curb of the existing access point to the Best Buy. So that southern curb line to our southern curb line is roughly about 12 feet from where it is existing right now. So originally, I think when we were here last time, the access road came in, or the underground parking came here, so it shifted north. And I can go back to the slide that actually shows it in context. Am I going the wrong way? Yeah, this one's probably a little bit better. So right now, as cars would come in and out, they would go across from the commercial site. And that was pretty consciously done to move it so it's not facing into the residential property, but directly across from the commercial property. I think in addition to that, this side has changed probably the most, where we added the plinth, the one-story plinth around the perimeter of that entire section from this end corner here all the way to this corner here. So that's pulled back. It's a one-story plinth. That is a stone plinth, and so that actually provides walk-up apartments. So we do have walk-up directly to the sidewalk that wraps the entire perimeter and includes the park area. So that was one of the changes. So we pulled the scale of the building back off of the street. We added that sidewalk. And then in addition to that, and I'll try to run through some of the changes, and I think I'll probably try to get to a lot of the comments or questions. And then certainly we can answer any questions. But the sidewalk was actually probably a little more thought out from the sketch plan, where it came, it's now coming continually around the site. Originally there was a dual sidewalk on the York Avenue side, so we were keeping the one right behind the curb. All that pedestrian traffic has been brought up into what we've been calling the linear park, which, yep, there we go, right up through here. And so this is an 8-foot sidewalk with apartments that walk up, with the idea that this portion of the building has a slightly different look, the west half, than the east half. On the west half, this sidewalk is enhanced. This is a direct access into the residential lobby. So we're facing on the main street, that kind of residential access, the canopy, the vitality, all of that, and we're directing people from the inside of the apartments to this point, to the crosswalks, whatever the crosswalks may be in the future. The idea is to get them here to that public sidewalk. Then this public sidewalk, as you see behind the trees, is 12 feet. Those trees are set within the sidewalk for a total of about 18 feet across here. So this portion of the sidewalk through here is 18 feet, and then it drops back down to 12 feet. And then as we get down to the terrace area, which is in front of that cafe, it's 20, 25 feet if you include the terrace. But so it really kind of expands. And the thought is that there's kind of a more, what we're saying, kind of a more used side, more commercial side, more traffic side, and then the more residential side. So we're trying to keep the east half as a more residential half of the building, and the west half has a little bit more of a commercial character to it, a little bit more public character to it, and a little bit more of the transition in the walkways. That walkway does have some inset areas. It does have, for different types of paving materials, different type of scoring patterns, so it's not a boring long walk that wraps the entire thing. And that's what we're trying to pick up in some of these colored areas throughout here, so that there is a terrace. They do spill into areas of different landscape zones, and that within that there's trees actually set within that. I think one of the other things I'd like to point out on that is, I'm going to try to get to the landscape plan, excuse me, right here. So what's happening is that there's about a 4 to 5 foot break across that, and so you can see these walls in section here and in here. That section, right as people are walking here, so you'd have the curb, you'd have kind of a grass area. That grass area does berm up a little bit, and then the wall kind of lifts them up about 4 feet. So in addition to having distance from the traffic zone, it's also lifted up. So that as people are walking by, they're actually higher than the car, so you're not in the splash zone. And also that wall, and you can see that in the renderings, the wall actually provides what we're thinking is kind of the gateway, and that's kind of a limestone wall that wraps around the edge.
Yeah, while you're on that picture, you're talking about an 8-foot sidewalk, and then in that inset it says a 6-foot walk. So could you just
This area right here, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Oops, I'm sorry. Yeah, this area, it varies. Oh, yeah, happy finger there. So the area through here, matches the existing sidewalk that's there right now, which I believe is a 6-foot walk through this edge, and then it expands out all the way throughout here, and this is the portion you can see, actually it's not on this plan, on the other one, where it widens out to 12 feet between the trees and the sidewalk edge. So it does change all the way throughout that
Okay.
section from 6 to 8 to 12.
So on the east side, it's mostly that's 6.
I believe that's a 6-foot walk, which was matching the existing walk.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
And so, let's see. So coming back to kind of the wraparound, and then as you continue around, this terrace area is set off from the public sidewalk with a series of planters. And so there's a little bit of definition off Southdale Circle. We did feel that there's going to be a fair amount of movement on Southdale Circle, so we want people who are at the coffee shop, when they come into that they actually have a place that they can sit out and feel safe and protected, so they actually activate that space. In terms of the circulation, then, it continues around. You can continue to walk through Southdale Circle all the way back to the park on the other end. So the sidewalk does wrap all the way around the edge. This wall, I know was brought up before, does screen the parking. It's about a 1-story parking. It does have a guardrail on top, so it's roughly about 15 feet tall. That wall, it has vines on it. It does have windows in it. It has a series of kind of random windows to it. There is kind of an overlook from the courtyards that look over the top of that bring the wall down to the plaza level, and that has a railing. So the idea is to get some visibility to and from. We did want to block some of the Taco Bell from what was happening there. We do open up the courtyards to the east side as well. Also on the west side of that wall, this corner right here is the access point up to the plaza, so that'll have a kind of a stair, and it'll have kind of a trellis, a small little building, which will actually be a security feature. And so the people from the residential area, the pool area, can actually walk down that stair and engage the sidewalk right away. And so we wanted the ability to be able to kind of connect all of those levels on a pedestrian sense and wrap entirely around the building. In terms of the traffic is coming. I know this was a question coming into the building. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Oh, we don't have that. Where would I'm looking for the plans. Okay. Actually, while I'm getting this out, you can see on this overhead view that the wall right here along this edge, actually this is a series of vines. It shows better in the elevations if it's in your package. If not, I can bring them up. But that series of that wall has a series of windows and whatnot. Is that in a good location? Oh, I see. I gotcha. Okay, so this is the parking area. So as people on the first floor, so the two levels of parking do not communicate, with the idea that can split traffic. Part of the other piece of this is a public ramp in essence. So visitors would come here. Coffee shop people would come here, so people can drive in and out. The lower level of parking is a secured level ramp, so that's for residents only, and you'd actually have to have a security to get into that. So as you drive into this, there is a lobby that goes directly through to the coffee shop, and so this point from the parking level, there is it's the management office. It would be the sales office for the apartment, so any residential concerns or anything that's going on in terms of new people coming in, there's high visibility. There's also a little bit of security and control on that corner so that people in that office can see what's happening on probably the busiest part of the site. But then that spills into the cafe. And the cafe we see as being kind of multifunctional. One is certainly open to the public. People come and get a cup of coffee. Also as an amenity to the guests is that they would come down the elevator, the main lobby here, and they can spill directly into that cafe as an amenity. This did shrink, and I want to talk a little bit about that because that is one of the changes from last time. We were looking at about a 5,000 square foot restaurant. Actually, we were about 3,500. When they went out to the market, 3,500 is kind of an awkward dimension for a restaurant, that it's too big or too small. We looked at increasing the size up to about 5,000. which really drives about 100 parking stalls. And to drive 100 parking stalls also drives traffic, and so then you're adding that much more traffic. We would have had to add an complete additional level under this one. And so by the time we looked at the cost of that, the amount of parking or the amount of traffic and access and trash and all of those things, it just really didn't make sense. So we went from 3,500 up to about 5,000, and we feel the sweet spot is probably closer to the 1,700 square feet, which is a good coffee shop size, but also has the ability to do sandwiches and some more quick serve, but doesn't drive the numbers that you need. That's really going to drive the parking. Also, it actually is a pretty good amenity for the people within the building. It also supports more of a pedestrian activity because coffee shops tend to drive pedestrian traffic also because people like to walk. We also feel that as you're coming in and out of Southdale Circle, it does have great access. So in terms of the traffic report, we do see it as being people who are on the road who are going to pull over quickly, get a cup of coffee, and engage, and I think that's a positive. I think in the terms of the rest of the changes, a number of them, can we go back to the screen? That would be better. A number of them is just trying to get more definition from last time. I know one of the comments was maybe that the white color was a little bit too much, and so I do have a sample board, Is that, would it be better up there? Okay. Okay, I'm not sure how the color rendition works up there, but hopefully you can see it if not. So this is a series of the materials on the boards. We had originally had kind of a whiter stone. We've got a little...
Switch it.
Oh.
The materials index lineup.
So if you have if you have the elevations in front of you, the numbering system is the same. This is the same material index that are on the elevations. So this is roughly the stone. It's a cast stone product. It's in kind of a buff yellowish white tone, but it is warmer than what we had shown last time. There is a limestone retaining wall that wraps a good portion of the site. That's the one that the sidewalk was raised up upon. We have two sections of metal panel. You can see that there's a lighter version and a darker version with insets of stone. We did wrap on the front side of this, there's a series, we looked at doing kind of a series of buildings, one in the metal, one in the stone, one in the metal. And then on the west side, which was more of the, again, kind of maybe more of the more commercial side, we're trying to blend a commercial look and a residential look with a lot of glass, a lot of cutouts, and really pick up on the radius. And that has that's basically stone, and that's where there's a little bit of this white metal panel. So although I kind of apologize because when you look at the sample board, this looks like the largest one on there, and it's probably the smallest one, but that's the samples I get in. So this is actually, there's a fair amount of stone on the project. There's a fair amount of this color. There is some cement board siding on the backside, particularly in the courtyards. There are some aluminum highlights, so the storefront around the front side of it is some aluminum, and there's some aluminum detailing to it. And then there's some kind of a taupey colored window, and then there's some dark bronze black railings and accents as well. I'm also going to pass out, this time there's some shadow studies, so I'll just pass those around. Actually, can I have just one? I'm going to put it up on the board. So what I just sent around is some shadow studies. We basically look at, I'd say 3 times during the year, and this is labeled as 2, September 21st, which is the autumnal equinox, but it's actually the same as the spring equinox as well, so March and September are the same, and then December. Any time between those times, it only gets better in terms of sun casting shadow. So we're trying to... It's kind of hard to balance and do it while you're watching the screen. But the upper one is the September 21st, which is also the same as March 21st. The bottom one is December 21st. So the December 21st is the worst case scenario. And actually by 4 o'clock it is dark, which is why it is showing dark. So what you're seeing is kind of the worst case scenario. We also bracket it through the day, basically from 8 a.m. and on the bottom one it says 11 p.m. That should say 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. So it does start to get a little bit, obviously when you get very late in the day, shadows are infinitesimal right before the sunset. So that does indicate on 21st what you'll notice on the worst case scenario, midday, this isn't even 12 o'clock. It's hitting the other side of the street, but has not quite, there's still sunlight on the back sidewalk, on the north side of the street. And that's really, it's a big street. So that's why the shadows have less effect. You can certainly see what happens on the, pretty much the rest of the year, which is between March and September, which is probably more of your walking months. And I think I'm sure I've missed some of the other questions through here. So I think
on
maybe
the shadow study here.
Oh, yeah.
No, but if you looked at June 21st, that's when you're more likely to get shadows on the residential further to the south, right? Because the sun's going to be a lot higher.
Well, it'll never really shadow the south because the sun, in the very late in the afternoon on June 21st, the sun is greater than 180 degrees. So by that time, it'll approximate and start going across to the commercial, but basically you're on an east-west pattern, and all the residential is south, so there's very, very little shadowing.
I'm thinking across the street more, but yeah.
Yeah, there will be a little bit. It'll be close to, you can see on 4 p.m. on September 21st. Mm-hmm. Now, June 21st at 4 p.m., that shadow, because it's still very, very high in the sky, is going to be not even hit the other side of the street.
Well, let's say 6 p.m. then.
It's probably just starting to hit the curb. And by the time you hit 8:30, at some point in the day, because the sun is low on the horizon, a person will cast an infinite shadow. So, it kind of depends on how far you want to look at it and to what extreme. So if this isn't far enough or you want to see more, we can happily provide additional information on those specific times.
My concern is I think that this doesn't really reflect the impact as much, the potential impact on the residential homes across the street to the east, including even a block over. So that's why I was asking about June 21st.
So I think the takeaway is provide June 21st, right?
Okay. We can do that. And I think with that, I don't know, I'd be happy to open up to any other questions that may have come up. Otherwise, I think the staff report kind of said a lot, kind of pointed out the changes that we've made. I think we tried to listen to what happened last time through, make some of those changes to the materials. We certainly added the affordable housing, which was a big one. We tried to find the right size for the restaurant cafe, that intersection, and really tried to work through some of the details in terms of the sidewalk and how that functions. So,
questions, Commissioner Nemra?
Thank you very much for a good presentation. For the walk-ups, what's the security situation on those? You can just address how some of the residents there would feel secure.
It's probably not a lot. It's probably not dissimilar from the residential just to the south of that. So they have a front door. It's a solid door. Generally, put windows next to the door so people can look out. One of the advantages in this case is that the way the building is set up is that slab level of the floor is roughly 4 feet. It's about 3 feet above the sidewalk, and then the sidewalk is another probably about 1.5 feet above the curb. So you're about 5 feet up. So one of the reasons I say that is so from the sidewalk, from the road, as the cars are going by, there's less impact of the car to those units. And then in terms of, the walk-ups themselves, it also has more separation from the sidewalk itself. So it feels like a private zone, is what I'm trying to get at. It's kind of more of a traditional approach. I think there's another one on the side, too, that shows it. Oh, maybe not.
Commissioner Hobbs.
First of all, thanks. I really like the changes that you've made. I think it actually looks like a very good plan. But I also really wanted to commend you on your bring back the American elm tree. I thought that was great. We don't see that very often. And actually, your whole tree planting, I appreciate they're using service berries and American elm and some of the native species that we have. So that's terrific. Thanks, I appreciate that. Could you talk a little bit about your stormwater management, stormwater treatment, how that's going to work?
I could talk a little bit about it. Is there happen to be a plan in here of that? I didn't see one.
In my PowerPoint?
Yeah, it is not, right? Unfortunately, I do not have one. I can talk through it. Do you have one in your package?
Didn't really see one that's really about stormwater treatment itself. That's why I was kind of curious.
So there's kind of a two-part thing. We're collecting the water. The majority of the water is being collected, and it goes into an underground tank within the South Park. And then the majority, we're on a different, let's see. I can go back to the screen. Oh, look at that. Thank you. Thank you. So you can see under the park area, there is a field, and that field is an underground infiltration chamber. So most of the water is taken through the underground infiltration chamber. And it's taken it to the low side of the site. And actually, the northeast corner of the site is the low side of the site, and that's where the utility connections are. So these utility connections are coming through here. We have a secondary system on the west side as well to collect the water, bring the water in, and bring it back to that northeast corner. And then we're looking at some stormwater capture to do irrigation.
Okay. And the irrigation, where you're going to have some of the sod on the north side, is that where you're talking about using it?
Probably more of it will be on the south side, on the play area, but also on the park area on the northwest side.
Right.
We'll see how much we can capture for the boulevards.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
Commissioner Olson?
I don't know. I know you've got 16 different plans going up there, but can you bring the site plan back up, or I don't know?
That one might be the easiest, yeah.
Well, you can even without. So I know that we don't know exactly where the pedestrian crossings are going to be if we're working with that. But so I know you're also talking about how the sidewalk has been kind of lifted up a little bit from the road. But do you see any difficulty with connecting? Oh, that was a good one.
I was going to actually go here because of the sidewalk.
So will you be able to provide direct access, like from the entrance, or wherever the pedestrian crossing is, from that corner to?
I see what you're saying. Yeah. So are you kind of thinking right through here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Versus making people so.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And so, is there, the elevation? Will that work? For ADA or?
Correct. Right. This is all pretty close to grade, so that connection would happen right here. Right across that. And so on this side, there is a little bit of slope to the side, even though when you look at it, it looks flat. It's actually not quite. So we will have a flat area here that would make that connection. And I think in the future, we'd be happy to see, something a little nicer there, whatever that may be. And we'd have the interest of getting the people who live here to goods and services as well. So I think we're certainly motivated.
Great. Just want to make sure you can work with whatever we come up with in the future to make that really kind of an easy access. Just another quick question. In your packet that you provided, you were mentioning that the building is adaptable to change over time. And so I don't know if this was an older version, or I thought it was what you've just submitted, but you were talking about how the cafe, they could actually add commercial or retail if it's desired. On our packet, it's A6J. I don't know if you've got numbers. But anyway, my concern is because of the parking. We've been talking about that, as whether or not there's enough parking. And also, I think you had mentioned also in your text that, you reduced the size of that restaurant because you were worried about having to add additional parking. So I guess it's kind of a question to you. When you talk about it being adaptable, what are you thinking about
Right.
doing in the future? And then even before you answer that, Carrie, what kind of control do we have over what happens there, what's approved today, and what happens in the future? But anyway, so two-pronged. But go ahead and you can answer yours first.
Yeah, I guess my thought on the adaptable is not in the near term. We're very happy with where it is in the near term, but we don't know what's going to happen 20 years out, and we're hoping this building's here for 50 to 70 years. My guess is that we're not going to be driving as many cars going forward because car use is actually on the decline, and the more you have apps and all these things that pick people up and maybe driverless cars, who knows, that some of those spaces that we are dedicating to parking may actually be convertible. So the front end, and the reason this was said in that is the front end is designed as kind of commercial heights for the building, so that what we're used to at about a 16-foot height is you could, maybe it is a restaurant in the future that can, the parking begins to work. If we make that changes, I'm sure that comes back to the city to approve that because it's a use change, but Carrie can correct me if I'm wrong. But the idea was that the building was built long-term, that it interfaces with the pedestrian street, it was done with enough glass that if in the future, whatever that may be, it can be done. So we're not pushing units on that location. We're saying this is kind of a commercial location. And so one of the reasons for the height is a little bit related to that, keeping a 16-foot floor plate on that lowest level so that it does have a longer term life. If we dropped it to an 11-foot typical residential level, that does not really work well for commercial. Even though a coffee shop could probably go in there, it isn't really what a commercial user wants to have.
That's correct. So any change, Carrie, would that have to go back through your approval or the city approval? Any change of use?
It would, yep. If we were to add commercial, we have to look at parking regulations, and so that would take an amendment to the PUD should this get approved. And to answer your question about what do we control in terms of the future access and pedestrian, it would be covered right now in your condition number 6, and it would be, we would work that out as part of the development agreement, what they would be responsible for putting in. So let's say the county is agreeable to eliminating that free right. So we would work that into the development agreement that they would be responsible to make those improvements of eliminating that free right, adding that green space. Or if it's if we're going to do a roundabout or whatever it may be in the future, that's where that cost sharing. So we would have some language in the development agreement. So we're specific on what the city is getting as a result of this project. So now is our time to get those, to make those requirements as part of this rezoning.
I just have one more quick question. So can you explain the 75 versus the 70 feet height?
I can. So technically, as I understand the way the ordinance is written for the height, it's from natural grade. And so the site, and I'm getting a section here because I think this will be helpful, but the site on the northeast corner is roughly 5 feet below what's on the west side. So if we are flat across the building, we are already starting at 5 feet above natural grade. So and the reason I'm showing this section is that the way to make this function on the second level, the plaza level, is to keep this relatively flat all the way across. By keeping it flat, the residences can go out to the terrace. Also, in terms of affordability, it keeps everything above that first level and even, and people can transition all the way across. What it means is that on the lowest level, because we have the higher commercial heights, we're actually ramping the inside of the ramp up, but we're still at that 5 foot above natural grade, and we can't get that height down. We can get it down to about 71 feet, but that's just really right on, and then we start having to get to, and by 71 we're down to 11 foot commercial heights, because otherwise we're getting into a lot of expense and some spaces that don't function quite as well. So it's when you look towards the south end of Xerxes, then the height goes back up. So it really just dips kind of in that front northeast corner, and that's why we're asking for that additional height.
I have a couple of comments. First, I'd like to compliment you on your exterior, especially along the York curve there. I think that will be a gateway, and I think it's nice to see someone thinking out of the square shapes a little bit as so many of these come in, and you obviously you must have taken some hits in your floor plate to do that, because most come in just the most efficient squares, so that's nice to see. Have you, as you get along, if you want to go back to the site plan, I'm just thinking out, go back to the screen. As you're along York there, I have a couple comments as that sidewalk goes around. Have you thought any public art along that piece, first of all? And then it just seems like it should be more of an outdoor space, and I get it's a wider sidewalk, but is there any opportunities for seating or benches or something out there, as you're facing, that's your window to the world there. Is there more you can do there, not just thinking about who would use it from the building, but how do people see that? And just from a more pedestrian scale standpoint in that corner, you do see the massing there, which is, I think, very nice, but, those pieces. So if you have any comments to that.
Certainly. The hope is that people would actually be able to, and I apologize a little bit because the trees actually hide, on the site plan, hide what's going on below, but essentially they're in kind of small planter areas. So as it would function, you could literally sit below those trees with a bench, if there were benches there. We thought a lot about if actually putting some kind of
Will there be benches there?
Pardon?
Will there be benches there?
Well, we thought about putting benches there, but the fact is it's on the north side, north facing into an intersection, and felt that that's actually probably not a great place to be. And so we were focusing more on the south west corner and to try to get the activity down to that end. So the thought is that people could be there, but it's more of a space that you move through rather than one that you would sit. And you could certainly stand and look over the wall, but it's probably not a place that people would want to sit, but maybe I'm wrong on that one.
Something to consider.
Yeah, and we did add, we did talk about maybe some of these locations for some art. So there was some of these inset places within the building that we thought, perhaps.
So it's kind of a technical thing, but as far as ME equipment screening, I'm a big proponent of that, just making sure there's not some stray transformer or whatever that comes out, or equipment. I mean, that needs all to be screened in like building materials, so it's nothing after the fact to show up that is a surprise. We've had that happen a few times. I want to make sure that all those are accounted for here, and you've thoughtfully put them in a spot that we don't have to see them.
I hope so, because that's like we'll go to a building and Excel says this is where the transformer is, and it kind of ends up there. But in this case, I can tell you probably where it's going to end up, because it's where it is right now, which is this location right here, which we are planning on screening that in a variety of ways, but that's something that we have to continue to work through where the transformer is. Most of the mechanical should end up. There will be a lot on the roof, and we'll work through it and certainly screen it if it's out visible.
I just want to echo the comment of Commissioner Olson on getting out to that island on York, being able to cross there, because I think from what I'm aware of, that's the only way out of this island, I think, right now. You can go south, obviously, but you go quite a ways to get down to the crossing towards Cub, and I think to get to Southdale, so I'd echo that concern. I just have a comment or a question on your parking. So I would just thinking out loud here, but you have 2 levels of parking, but once you get in there, there's no way to get between the levels, and I guess I would find that extremely frustrating if one is full. Do you have a plan to tell people that one's full or not full to kind of minimize the driving around, or what are you, if there's no internal circulation, what's your thoughts on that, or your plan?
So part of it would be how essentially parking stalls are a resource, and so the resources are something that needs to be managed. And that is something that does evolve a little bit over time. So we have a way
Right,
where
I
we
understand
would
people are going to
start.
tell you how they're going to use it, right?
Well,
or you're going to find out how
or you assign.
or you assign it.
Essentially, what we'd have to figure out, and part of this is going to be driven by the cafe and how many stalls are really generated by that, how many visitor stalls are really generated, so what's left over. The advantage of a residential project is that we all have different lifestyle patterns, so when somebody's at the gym, somebody else is home, and so there's a window of time, basically 12 at night to 5 in the morning, and it's not even that big, where you have where you have most of the people there. Otherwise, people are moving back and forth. So what you really want to do is have the most flexibility, because that gives you the most parking options. And so I understand that the more that they're connected, the more flexibility. But what I think in this case we'd end up doing is having assignment by floors, or it might be unit numbers. So these units have the lower level, these units are assigned up above, or we'll try to we'll maximize with the residential on the lowest level, and it's most likely that the first floor units will have that the main level that's open, because the other issue we have here is part of it's public, part of it's private. So I don't have a great answer for you. I do know that we looked at transitioning those two spaces, and we end up losing a fair amount of stalls to get a ramp in to connect those two.
I'm sure there's a lot of discussion about that. I guess the overall arching comment I have is just how do we make sure that the trip, as much as we can, the trip generated pieces are off Xerxes, or excuse me, off of Southdale Circle versus Xerxes as the best we can here. For what's going to create trips more, I'd rather see them be onto York, obviously, than Xerxes, and I'm assuming that you would share that too. And then I guess my final comment is can you talk about, you have 5% affordable housing, can you talk about why there wouldn't be more, and not necessarily, I think the new ordinance is 20%, Carrie, 10%, and why that couldn't be closer to the 10% in that range, understanding you got in under the buzzer in a way, but you're still at the point where it's still fresh in everyone's mind, and trying to understand why you wouldn't, kind of the give to get here type of thing on this. You are asking for more density, you're asking for height, some comp plan things that I understand obviously you need to make the numbers work, but why can't we get a higher numbers on that, even if maybe we're not at 10%, but over the 5, or some justification for why it's only 5%?
Well, I can answer. I think with the quality of product that we're using, and obviously the cost of the site, when we ran all the numbers, anything above 5% wasn't working financially. So we wouldn't have been able to do, some of the stone. We wouldn't have been able to do some of the stuff in the park. So at 5%, the numbers worked out where it isn't a huge hit to us. Anything above that, the project just started to fail. We'd have to take a number of the amenities that we wanted to have out of there. We'd have to take some of the rooftop stuff, or not the rooftop, but the plaza stuff out of there. So at 5%, we felt that it worked, and in our discussions with some of the city council members, after our meetings with them, we felt like that was the number.
Yeah, I guess I'd be, if gingerbready things are contributing the cost that you can't provide more affordable housing, I guess I would ask you to take a relook at that to see, what pieces there are in between, and maybe the council, I don't know, I mean, you're going to get to them eventually here, but that's just an overall comment I have on this. Commissioner Carr?
Again, overall, I think it's a very attractive plan. I can't recall what the original plans look like, but I know there's quite a bit of sidewall articulation across the entire front. There's also color variation, which is good. I just have one concern, and if you could go to the northwest view, and this has to do with this view right here. Yes, as you can see, there's color variation, which I think is attractive. There's sidewall articulation, which is good. There's some, I believe you can't see the trees there. The first level has a podium. Well, it's got a jutting out for those apartments on the lower level. it's just a very, very massive structure, and it's all one height. That's my concern with the current design. And it's, I don't know if you've considered it, but I know that if you take a look at the east view, which may be the next, that view right there, if you see on the left-hand side, there the building has moved down. And so again, going back to the northwest view, have you considered some variations in the height of the building?
So one
I
of
think
the
it moved down. Just how
That
you're
one
looking
right
at
there,
it.
yeah.
part of it is the view. It's taken at a little bit higher angle, and so it actually flattens out some of the rooftop. If we come back to actually the plan, it can show it as well. On the plan, so there is a fair amount of the building moving forward and back, and these areas actually drop back on the upper level even further than what's shown. This is actually kind of a first level. The upper level drops back into these notches.
Are you pointing out on the screen? And the screen that we're seeing is on the countertop.
Oh, sorry.
Or
So
now it's back to the. Well, okay, we're good. All right.
we're good? Okay, good. So these areas right here, this portion of the building is pulled back, which isn't showing that well in that rendering. These areas are pulled back, basically back to the corridor, so they're actually pulled back even further. What you're seeing in that side view, and it's really kind of an angle, was this piece that was pulled back, this piece that was pulled back, and you're actually seeing those two pieces in perspective. So that second one was 6 stories. Hate to say it, but so the thought is that yes, it is 6 stories, but it is being notched back into the building quite a bit, and the top level, right at the glass, does pull back a little bit as well. Obviously, the west side has a fair amount of articulation along that, so we can look at maybe pulling those back a little bit further, and those to kind of separate the buildings. Perhaps.
Well, again, I think that sidewall articulation is good. I think the color articulation is good, but again, it's all one height, and that's a big, massive structure. I don't know if you've considered, if you take a look again at the northwest view, you've got the building in the center, the two blocks that are in the lighter colored stone. I mean, you could knock off a level there, put the same white that's on the other side. It would just create a different look and not one massive structure all the same height. I think that adding some variety in the height could make it more interesting from the street side. So that's something I would ask you to consider.
Commissioner Forrest.
I have a few questions. Could you go to the first level garage, the coffee shop level garage?
I think we have to go back to the...
Okay, so you talked about the commercial area, in other words, the coffee shop having its trash picked up internal in the garage. Are they going to have to take it all the way over to the other trash area on the north side, or?
Yeah, there is a trash area that is right there.
So all the coffee shop trash is going to have to go over there as well?
Yep.
Okay. And do you have any location or any way of incorporating a spot where somebody can be picked up and dropped off? Because as you get different age populations and things, I mean, where they can stop their car and not be obstructing traffic that wants to get in and out and stuff like that, and that's safe for somebody whose mobility might be challenged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea. We do have within this drive pattern, there is an area that could be developed as a drop-off. Mm-hmm. And I think the thought would be that would be kind of a visitor, that we'd actually have visitor stalls that we could open up so somebody could actually pull in. A lot of times in those cases, a handicap stall also works for picking mm-hmm. somebody up. And there is a fairly wide corner that does mean 2 cars would have to pass. But,
well, you might have a mobility
yeah.
vehicle or something like that needs to stop and pick people up. And
this area does have a higher ceiling height throughout, so the idea is that you could get a van or one of those things through.
I think I read something about that in the narrative.
Lower level is van accessible.
Pardon?
Lower level is van accessible.
The upper level parking is van accessible.
Oh, upper level.
Not the lower level, yeah. We're keeping that more of the public side.
I'm sorry, this is the upper level here that we're looking at, right?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Then, I was looking at your narrative, and I have a few questions about that. When you talk about market vision, you say the overall look of the building and design is intended to appeal to this market. What is this market?
I think what we're seeing is a market, it's probably on the higher end. It's kind of a mix of people, but it's certainly somebody who wants to live by lifestyle with amenities, that wants to live in a location that's close to goods and services. There is a mix in range and sizes of the apartments from from kind of the affordable side all the way up to, and we've got units that are 1,500 square feet, so it's a wide range. And so we're trying to capture a range within this. Also, in terms of the courtyards and the streets, so there's an amenity side, there's a street side, so there's the walk-up, so we're trying to provide a little bit of mix. So when we say we try to appeal to the market, we see that it's a wide variety of people who would live here, but we're also seeing that we want to set something that is really, really quite nice. And so the stone will set that, the amenities will set that, the landscape, all of those things that kind of look at as something different. We recognize that there's competition out there, and we really want to kind of be the best in the area. So
I respect that. I'm just going to hammer some of these things at you, though, I will admit. When you talk about massing and being substantial enough to respond to the gateway nature of the site, and that stood out at me, too, because it means, in other words, to be a gateway, it has to be a big, tall building. And
I guess I read that more, or in writing that, it was more about the materials. So substantial in terms of using stone, in terms of putting a base on the building. As a stone base, it has the plinth, that has has materials that are a little nicer than we see in a lot of places. So I guess when I'm thinking substantial, that's the direction I was.
okay. So design as much as size, then, in other words, it's more. Speaking of that corner, when we were talking about the traffic and the access to a crosswalk, I think one thing, too, is to really carefully assess. The plantings are beautiful there, but they might actually obscure the vision of drivers coming on, seeing somebody ready to enter a crosswalk. So I guess just be cautious about that.
I think that's a great point, and I think that's a point we missed. So I think we need to relook at that landscape zone and how people actually cross there. I think you're right.
It's kind of a trickier deal than you'd think at first thought.
Yeah.
Now, somewhere, and I don't know where, I thought you talked about having an internal coffee shop or for residents, is that correct?
No, not completely. There's an internal access to the coffee shop. So
Okay.
if you were a resident, you could come down the elevator through a private lobby into the public vestibule and then into the coffee shop, so you wouldn't have to get wet. But it is still the public coffee
So
shop.
it's just the one then. Okay, that's what I was wondering. I'd say my biggest concern about this is we're calling it mixed use because it has one coffee shop, which is fine, except that a lot of the goal of having a mixed use project on a street like that is to actually engage the public. And now when you talk about your activity areas, your fitness area and all of that that's visible from the street, is that also at a higher height elevation than the sidewalk?
That's right at sidewalk level.
It's right at sidewalk level, okay. But again, it's kind of a bait and switch thing. It's like, oh, here, come and see what's going on, but you can't come in. So that kind of bothers me because it's like it's all for show, but it's not really engaging public on the street level. And I'm not meaning that to be a nasty criticism of just your project, because we've had other projects where we've really encouraged that kind of thing, and then they use the back door instead of the front door type thing. So that's the thing that I think bugs me the most. If you talk about anything bugging me, is the fact that these are really private spaces, and it shows activity, but it doesn't really engage the people who are walking by. Although I do like the idea of the walk-ups in that there's a real connection, a usable connection there.
Commissioner Nemiroff.
Thank you. So, regarding the market, if site, other words, if there were no zoning laws restricting you, would you have gone bigger because you think you could have filled it, the market would have provided you with tenants?
Well, I think part of that is obviously the cost that we have for buying the dirt. So, you know, the amount that the current owner is asking kind of was driving what we needed to get in there to make it work.
I may not have. The site is the driver of the cost. Is that what you're saying, or
the cost of the site?
Yeah.
When we look at it, whether we're doing it in Edina or we're doing it in Minneapolis or we're doing it in St. Paul, obviously we're looking at what we have, how much it's going to cost, and what can we put on it. So when we look at all of that, we try to figure out how many units. We want to maximize it, obviously, for the cost of the land.
What you're asking is, why aren't you asking for more units? Is that what you're asking?
If you could go higher, if you could go to 90 feet or 110 feet, would that be an economically viable, or do you think you'd have a lot more empty units?
Well, we actually talked about that, and knowing that there's, potentially, I think it's zoned for 12 stories across the street, and part of it is construction type, part of it is the shape of the building and wanting to have the amenities. So if it's a certain profile, I think a lot of the height has to do with the type of construction and not staying below the high-rise codes at 75 feet and not getting into concrete. Once you shift into concrete, then all of a sudden you take a 10% increase. And you don't see a lot of 7-story buildings because you've made that switch. Now you're up to 10 stories to pay for the offset. And we felt 10 was probably too high given what it was in the transition. So it was kind of weighing all those factors. And so part of it was saying, these guys set out and said, we're going to see if this works or not, come up with some ideas that actually seem to make sense, hold the street wall, provide some amenity spaces, and at 6 stories, the numbers also kind of work out with, and then you kind of back in to see, are the units the right units for who you think the market is going to be there. And I think that's where the mix between kind of the affordable side and a 700 square foot unit and a 1,500 square foot unit is. And so that's kind of the market. So I guess in some ways, maybe, but we tried to find the sweet spot of what works economically, what we think can be filled, and is affordable from a construction point of view.
And that's about where you are.
And that's where we are,
okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So do you have any thoughts of maybe putting a bus stop at Southdale Circle in York? Would that be your responsibility, or would that be someone else's? Because that would maybe be a good amenity for the residents instead of having to cross York, which is treacherous to get to the station. I don't know.
I think that's a great question. It is. I mean, it's always. We would love to see more transit right at our front door.
There is transit on the corner over here too.
Yeah, good point. There is transit right. There's a bus stop right there. In this, unfortunately, we don't control the bus stops or locations or the runs. So, but we're fortunate there is a bus at the northeast corner, and actually that it's right across the street. So I think getting people there is we need to do a better job at doing that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicants? You found another question?
I found the reference. I was looking at it. Let's put it that way. When we're in the narrative, it talks about the public realm, landscape, streetscape, and open space, and that the first floor has all active spaces with a restaurant, fitness room, and units. All of these uses are raised above the level of the street. That's what I had grabbed onto.
They are above the level of the street. They're not above the level of the sidewalk.
Okay, but is that a sidewalk that people are going to feel comfortable using that? I mean, it's not a separate sidewalk from the street level sidewalk.
Well, the sidewalk has actually been pulled back. So the current sidewalk is almost where the curb line is, right? So it's right at the back of the sidewalk. So we pulled it back quite a ways, and by pulling it back, it allowed us to raise that a few feet. So, and that does change throughout the site, so it actually comes up a little bit more when you get to 66, because we're trying to get closer to the walk-up apartments, and it dips down to be essentially right on grade in these two locations. So right through this section, the building is on grade, and so the sidewalk is level with the internal uses, but above the level of the street.
Okay, because then earlier when we were talking about the crosswalk and stuff and access to that, that means you're going to have to drop down a few feet to get to the crosswalk.
We are, yes.
Okay.
So my intention is right here at this location, we'll probably come in and start a slow ramp down. It's a couple feet, few feet, so I wouldn't even call it a ramp per se, and actually you can't do external ramps outside. It all has to be 1 to 20 slope, so that's what we designed to.
And then the sustainability stuff I forgot to ask about earlier. Where's your bike parking? You say every unit has bike parking?
Yep, we do have bike racks on the wall. There is a bike, let's see if I can find it, kind of a bike amenity area with the idea that there'd be a fix-it station. And actually, that's up there. So we've got a kind of a whole lower level that allows for bike storage. And what we're recognizing, actually, some people have multiple bikes. They'll have a commuter bike and they'll have another bike. So the bike storage is actually becoming more and more of a thing. So a fix-it station, air pumps, riding boards, so trying to promote riding. So the idea of having a culture that is with bikes actually helps our residents and helps build the sense of community. And so the more that kind of gets built in. We're talking about like a mini bike wash station, so that as people come in from the road, and which also is good for us because we don't want that mud truck through the building either. So, but we do want to kind of promote that use.
Do you have a dog wash station too?
Not yet, but I hear that's the thing to have.
That's all the rage.
Yeah, I guess the whole thing with sustainability, and again, we've had a lot of conversations here in the past as far as everybody says they're going to do it. And the specific that was mentioned was the LED lighting. But, and the staff report, one of the conditions was that sustainable design principles must be used per the applicant narrative. Attempts must be made to meet an energy savings goal of 15% over the current state energy code guidelines. That bothers me because first of all, it's not, it doesn't provide any solid measurable criteria. It's basically, it's all attempts based on, and then also the applicant narrative didn't have much detail as far as sustainable design principles. So I think that before you go to the council, I would really like to see something that's really concrete and measurable, and that you can be held to going forward as far as sustainability. And it might be something, I think that even what you've done with the whole bikes and facilitating all that for people is one very nice sustainable aspect. Maybe there are other things that you'll do internally with the residents, or I'm not sure what it would be, but I'd say I'd rather see something really state of the art rather than just it's a little bit better than code. So, and I think that's been a bothersome thing up here, for us for a long time is well, what is it and how is it measurable? So.
Any other questions for the applicants? Great, so obviously don't go far. So you can have a seat now. We'll call you back. So this is a public hearing. So if anyone wishes to speak on this, they can come up to either the side microphones. That'd probably be best. 3-minute time limit. There'll be a green, yellow, red button along the piece if you want to come up and speak. Give us your name and address as well.
Good evening. My name is Todor Brayanov, and I live at 6616 Xerxes Avenue South, which is right next to the south border of the project. We've lived in our house for 16 years. We originally bought it to live probably in 2 or 3 years in it, and then I'll grow it and move out to something bigger, but we fell in love with the location with the neighborhood, and once those years were passed, we realized that this is our home. We've maintained it throughout the years, and we've cared about it, and we've done upgrades to siding, roof, driveway. We finished the basement, and we were actually planning even to expand our patio, make it like a nice outdoor living area with pizza oven and a big fireplace. But once we found out about this, we decided we have to cancel this because of several concerns that we have. One of which is that we think that the quality of life for the remaining houses on Xerxes, there's going to be 3 houses left there, is going to change drastically. This apartment building, along with the Lennar building, which is on the south side, will increase the amount of the households in the block by 100 times pretty much. There used to be 5-6 houses. There's going to be close to 500 apartment building or apartments in the same area. And we believe that, and I realize that the traffic studies are pretty accurate, but the traffic on Xerxes will increase tremendously beyond what was with Best Buy, and I don't know how, I can't even imagine how much it's going to be right now. And I realize that we want to have a lot of people walking in the neighborhood, but we have to be a little realistic here. Most of the year, it's relatively cold. I don't know how much people will be walking outside, from November until April. So they're going to be driving a lot more than what we expect or plan. So that's why I don't think that 100 and some units will be a realistic number. We do have also concerns about privacy. There's going to be too many people too close to our house on a level that's above what we currently have. So what you have basically your backyard for relaxation and tranquility is basically going to be disturbed by that, I think. We do have also concerns about the values of the home, just because there's going to be only 3 houses left. That's pretty much impossible to figure out. But I did write all this in a letter. I hope you have received it and will consider it. I see that my time is out. So please do consider this in your decision and request for this building. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Seeing none, I'd take a motion to close the public hearing.
I move to close the public hearing.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So I'd take it back up here now for any discussions on this. There's been a lot of comments and presentations and a lot of information here, so I'd kind of like to hear people's thoughts and what they're thinking, and anything that obviously the applicant can maybe answer for us again too. So if anyone wants to kind of start out, Commissioner Carr.
Well, I would, again, I think it's a great plan. I would be in support of it, but subject to some conditions. One is I just want to make sure that the trees are on the boulevard side of the sidewalk. I'd want to make sure that that parking lot wall on the south side has articulations that is detailed in a plan. Right now we couldn't really see what that articulation was, so I think that should be presented to the City Council. And then third, I think that the applicant should submit a proposal to the City Council that presents some variations in podium height for both the north side and also the east side. The north side, my concern is that it's one huge, massive structure, all the same height, and I think that the applicant should present a variation on that for the City Council to look at. Again, that would be variations in podium height, which we did that for the Lennar development. Some of you may recall. And then on the east side, particularly in the south side of the building, again, that's facing residential units, both Edina and Richfield. And again, with the Lennar development, we asked for podium height variations there. So I would ask that the applicant, again, that the approval be subject to submission by the applicant to the City Council of a proposal for podium height variations on both the north and the east side of the building.
Well, I agree that I think that the plan that you brought is very improved, and I really like a lot of the amenities and the public aspect that you've brought to it. But I'm really struggling with the density and the height. And Richfield, it's proposed for 24, units per, maximum. That's, and 105 right there. And then also the 6 stories. I struggled with that. The Lennar, I think I voted against that. So, I'm struggling because I really like all the, positive aspects you brought, but I'm really, again, we're just kind of randomly saying 105 just because that's what's being proposed, and I don't know that I can support that. I understand why you're doing it, to, cover some of these other costs, but I just think that's too high for this area and for development right up or next to residential.
I just wanted to comment on your comments. Again, if you do some variations in podium height in both the north and the east side, that is going to decrease the density. And you may have some areas of the building that are 6 stories, others that may be 5 stories or even 4 stories, depending on what the plan is. So that gives you some variation visually, but also decreases the density somewhat too.
I think the density discussion is sort of a bet on the future, and that is, in other words, 10 years from now, are we going to want housing developments? 10, 15 years from now, are we going to want housing? Are we going to want more people in a more dense area? I think the Midwestern style of living that's been experienced for much of the last 50, 60 years may change over time. But again, this is a bet, and that I suspect that 10, 15 years from now, more density will be a growing trend, and in fact that we may wish that this as a signature building into Edina were bigger and more dense than it is. We may find that we want this neighborhood to not be a neighborhood as conducive to cars, and we'll figure out a way to deal with the pedestrian requirements. But I do think it's a big bet, and I do think it's the future. I do think it's a direction that I would lean. Really, I think it's a nice plan. I guess the builders think that this plan is presented is what they think that they can financially, that the market will bear, and I can't second guess that. The one thing that I'm stuck on, I think a lot of people like, is, and I would have liked it a year ago, is the walk-up. I was in a different city. I was in another city earlier this year that has undergone tremendous urban renewal. Beautiful city that was not a beautiful city just a few years earlier, and they had buildings in better temperature too, so a more walkable area. And they had walk-ups, and I'll tell you, you walk around at night in this nice, all-new city pretty much. The walk-ups at night that weren't lit and weren't rented looked a little weird. They looked a little unsafe. They looked unsafe to the residents. They looked unsafe to the pedestrians. And so that's my only concern is, are those walk-ups going to give kind of an empty look to people, both to residents and to people visiting, coming through Edina? Other than that, I think this is a good plan, and I would support it.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I'm also very impressed with the plan and like how it looks. I too agree. I'm less concerned about the density issue. I mean, I think as part of what we're looking at Southdale, and one thing that struck me in that whole exercise is how underutilized a lot of that space is. And I think looking forward, we're going to be looking to. This is really a key part of our community, looking to have a fairly high density in the future. And so imagining that what we're doing here is approving a building that might be here for 50, 60, 70 years, I can see where that might make sense in the future. So I think overall, I think they've done a very good job in terms of the design. I think it can offer something for our community that is pretty different from what we have today. So I'm in support of it.
I'm all in favor of the high density. I love that idea too. I think I'm just a little bit more concerned, or being more sensitive to it being adjacent to Richfield and to those residents, and know that that's a concern. And so I'm just struggling if this is the exact location where that higher density should be taking place. So it's not density. I love the density, all the other amenities, but it's just this location.
Well, it'll be interesting as Richfield, if they, go to the medium density housing along there, understood, but, that it is they're thinking of it as, it is what it is today, but obviously they're thinking of it as more of a transition zone too. It's kind of like a high density R2 district, right? It's kind of what they're thinking there. So that's just a comment. I know they're single family homes today, but Commissioner Forrest, did you have something?
I like the plan. I like the idea of concentrating density in certain areas. I wouldn't exactly call this trend, when you talk about transitional, and it makes me think of transitional areas to the Southdale district, and how during the last comp plan discussion they were talking about gradually increasing the heights back to the residential areas and things like that. So there are a lot of things I like about this plan. I like it a lot. I like the appearance of it a lot. I like the design aspect is very, very nice. My concerns, and because we're advisory to the City Council, I'm going to vote against it because I think there's some points that need to be brought up and discussed at that level. I'm concerned about the density, or more the size, the density, and the loomingness of the building over those single-family homes. Not even just next door, but across the street and even on the next block. When I was listening to the Richfield residents, Mr. Branova, I'm not sure I'm saying. Edina resident. Okay, I'm sorry, but when I think about that, I think privacy, security, traffic, all of those issues. It's a 3-block stretch of Xerxes that's going to hit a lot of southbound traffic. I don't think the traffic thing is, and we've got the numbers, but I don't think it's really been thought out as far as how it's going to apply outside of the numbers to that specific neighborhood, that specific intersection, in light of especially the fact if we get another large residential project going kitty corner to the northwest, on the northwest corner of that intersection. And then the other thing I'm still bothered by is the fact that we've got these wonderful, I think the coffee shop it's a well done, it's a good location for it, but here you've got all this so-called publicly viewable activity areas that are not for the public. And I think that, and then even this pedestrian connection going through from Xerxes over to York, personally, if I see a path going through, between, say, they have a play area identified in that pocket park, okay, that's their yard. That's not a path I'm going to go on. I'm not going to go into this is somebody else's private residential area. So It might be a cut-through, but how many people are going to feel comfortable using that as a cut-through on a regular basis, say to cross to the transit area over at Southdale? Maybe it would gain, over time, gain that kind of use. And then also, I think that we need to identify as a city, because the PUD, as our chair pointed out, it's a give and take thing. Well, we're giving height, we're giving density, we're giving setbacks, we're giving a lot of things too. And we're getting 5% affordable housing, and I'm not sure what all else. So I think we need to look at that too and make sure that we're getting, it would be a very attractive project. I would say that's a plus. And maybe another plus is the increased density in that area than we would otherwise have. But it just seems a little bit like a mismatch. So.
Other discussion or any motions or comments? Commissioner Nemiroff?
I'll make a motion to approve it as submitted. I would encourage the developer to think about the walk-ups, but I won't make a motion about that. I would, as submitted by staff, that's my motion.
So a motion, second, any comments to that?
I would like to make a motion to amend that. Motion? A second.
Well, you can ask them to amend it.
Yes, I'd like to ask.
They don't
Friendly
have to
amendment,
accept it.
subject to what I discussed before. One of the conditions to the approval that trees be put on the boulevard rather than right up next to the building, and it makes for a more pedestrian-friendly environment. That would be one condition that would be added. Second of all, that there be articulation on the south-facing parking lot wall, and that a detailed plan be submitted to the City Council. And then finally, that the applicants, that this not necessarily be a condition to our approval, but that the applicants be required to submit a different plan that shows variations in podium height on both the north and east sides of the building. Again, the north side for variation in height. It's a huge, massive structure. And on the east side, having some variation in height, particularly on the south side, because that is facing residents both in Edina and Richfield.
So I have a, thank you very much, Commissioner Carr. So I have a question for the chair. I think I'm comfortable amending to add the trees on the street side of the sidewalk, but I'm less comfortable with the articulation of the wall and the podium height, because I feel like they get in, those are design issues that are a little beyond my skill set. And so what I'm wondering is if it's possible to have two votes, and one for my motion and one for Commissioner Carr's amendments regarding design.
Well, as a point of order, typically an amendment comes in as a motion, as a separate motion, and then you vote on the amendment first, and then you vote on the motion as amended or as not amended. And if there's some dispute, then let's just vote on an amendment and then move forward to the motion and do it by Rogers.
So you want to vote on the amendment? Or we get to the motion?
Amendment in second.
Well, you got friendly amendment. You can decline the friendly amendment.
Yeah, he can decline it, or
Okay,
he can accept it.
Yeah, maybe I'll do. I'm not sure. Any suggestions?
Well, again, the
your
tree was really a condition to the approval, and the other ones, I don't know how you would phrase those, Carrie, but they were more suggestions at the City Council that proposals be made on both those issues by the applicant.
In regard to the boulevard trees, if I could suggest a friendly, they're subject to county approval because all those trees are within the county right-of-way, and they are proposing boulevard trees. So maybe it's boulevard trees subject to review and approval of the county. In regard to the wall articulation, you could ask the developer to create a plan that shows that in a little more detail. I think as they described it, they may have satisfied the articulation issue, but we just would want a plan that shows that. And then as far as the third issue goes, I guess that's a decision for the commission. The Lennar project, that is what they did. They stepped in the 6th level, reduced a few units on that Xerxes side. So it appears to be 5 stories from the street, but it is 6. Depending on where you're standing, they just stepped it in a little bit. I think that's what you're after there with the height articulation.
But that wasn't, you weren't putting that on as a condition though, were you? You were only putting the trees on as a condition?
The tree was really the only condition, but the others were requirements that the applicant present those proposals to the city council so that when they take a vote on it, they have more information to make a decision.
So that would be part of the meeting notes and the recommendations to the council then versus part of the resolution here, correct? Right.
A suggestion that they create a plan that shows an alternative for the 6-story, if I'm understanding
What I'm
that
saying
right.
is that basically our approval of this, it goes to the city council with the condition about the trees being subject to county approval, and with the condition that the applicant submit plans on the articulation of that wall, and that they also submit a plan that shows podium height variations on both the north and the east. It's not a requirement that the actual plan adopted have that, but that the applicant show that to the city council.
Okay, so you're proposing all those are conditions of approval.
Yes.
So Commissioner Nemiroff, you can decide if you want to accept any or all of those, right? I mean, it's your motion yet. That's my understanding. So you can accept all of them, one of them, none of them.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I'm waiting for Steve Harvey to come out. I'm comfortable with the trees. I'm not yet comfortable with the wording of the requirement. I would be comfortable, I guess, regarding the articulation and the and the height issues. That it to be a suggestion that the builder presents alternative plans showing that, or to review that and have something to present. But I'm concerned that I haven't figured out in the last 5 minutes how to word that in such a way that we're not requiring a change to the plans that were presented tonight.
That's what I'm struggling with too.
If there's a way to say that if there's a way to include these ideas as a requirement of something presented to the city council, but still approve the plans as presented tonight, I'm okay. But I'm not sure that I've heard that or figured it out.
So what?
So I will move that we accept the presentation or the proposal by staff with approval subject to the conditions and staff, and calling out the requirement that the trees be on the boulevard subject to county approval. My guess is I'm going to drive home tonight and think about how to word something that would make everybody comfortable on the other 2 items. I'm sorry that my brain isn't working on caffeinated coffee time this evening.
It's not your requirement. So someone else just proposed. So you.
Yeah.
Is that first one okay with the seconder?
If anyone has suggestions, I'm open.
Okay. Before that, Carrie, I just want a number 8 in the conditions. I have a question there. It says attempts must be made. I'm not sure that attempts must be made meet an energy savings goal of 15%. Is that there's some wording?
Yeah, I
there?
missed the 2.
And then it's savings goal of 15% over the current state energy code guidelines. So you're saying they only have to be, they can be up to 15% using more energy than the energy code guidelines? Shouldn't that say under?
Savings goal.
Something isn't making sense to me there, and maybe I'm missing it all, but
The savings should be 15% more savings than.
At least 15%, is that what you're trying to say?
that's what I think you want to say, and that's not how I read that, though. So it's a comment which I just want to understand. My thoughts on that is we're requiring them to use 15% less energy than current energy code, right? Than Minnesota Energy Code.
Right.
And that's not what that says to me. So is there a way
I can
we
work
can
on the wording on that.
wording? So Commissioner Nemiroff, I don't know if that changes your motion at all, but I just want to make sure that wording is changed to reflect that the building shall be 15% more efficient than state energy guidelines.
I agree, yeah, thank you. I agree. I guess I was thinking we could add something that, we had this discussion, the city council is going to be reviewing this discussion, and I think everyone, including and perhaps most of all the developer now, is forewarned that the city council may be looking for things regarding articulation of that south wall, and that the city council may, based on precedent here with the Lennar building, be looking at, hey, maybe there should be some kind of step back in the height area. So I don't know if I can make a recommendation that that's what they do. I think the plan presented should go forward as is. But I think at the very least that, Builder, you're forewarned that this may be an issue that your final approval may be based on it, and that they should give serious thought to how they would address that for the city council. That's about all I can come up with on that.
Yeah, the council will get our notes. A lot of them, something like this, they'll actually watch the presentation too.
They will know that we're going to discuss this issue. I'm sure of it.
And some are here, so.
I know that one for sure knows about it. I know that for the fact.
Okay. He'll tell people. So with that, there's a motion seconded. I think we had a lot of further discussion, so. And the one piece that was accepted was the Tree Boulevard question,
and
right?
Energy.
And energy, right? So with that, Carrie, I would call for a roll vote on this as you go across, so.
Commissioner Hobbs.
Aye.
Commissioner Olson.
Nay.
Commissioner Carr.
Nay.
Commissioner Forrest.
Nay.
Commissioner Thorson.
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss.
Aye.
Commissioner Nemiroff.
Aye.
And Chair Platter.
Aye. So if I read this right, it passes 5-3, correct?
Yep.
So thanks, and goes on to council now, and I don't know has the date been set on that, Carrie?
Yes, that will be December 1st.
Gotcha. Thank you, everyone. So back to our agenda. I had a question I didn't ask before. So was it strategic to put the community comments after the public hearings, Carrie, or because I like to have that beforehand, so if someone wanted to say something, they wouldn't necessarily have to stick around till the end here.
Yes. So the Planning Commission, our agenda is different from every other commission and council. They typically have the community, we typically have the community comment before public hearings. But now that we're on this Novus agenda, everything is set up automatically for us. So that's why it's turning up after the public hearings, because that's the natural format.
Can we automatically change it?
You could change it at the meeting.
Okay. I mean, you guys tell me, but I like it. People can come in and say something. I think having it last, and there may be strategic reasons for it, for people to wait through it, but I don't agree with that, and so I guess we could. Is there any way to change it overall, or would we have to do that every darn meeting?
I'll ask the question.
Okay.
If that's something that we can
Because
still be flexible on.
We specifically changed that a few years ago for that very reason.
Right.
Okay. So having said that, is there anyone who wants to make some community comment? Get your 3 minutes. I'd ask that you don't speak on anything that was covered tonight, but thank you. Good night. Hearing none, I'd take a motion to close the community comment.
I move to close public comment.
Any second? Motion seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So up next is reports and recommendations. I'm not aware that there are any tonight. Correspondence and petitions. I did not see much on here. Did anything come up? Chair and member comments. I just have a comment that we will not have another meeting in November now. That's been canceled, and the same thing in December. We'll have, I believe it's what date is that? The 9th? We would not have a meeting after that. So I would ask Carrie, if it's going to be a long night, that, we'd want to obviously turn anything away, but potentially we would start the meeting earlier. I don't know if we would have that, but I just want to throw it out to everyone as a way to not necessarily stay as late, and we would only have one meeting in December as well. So just a comment, and I guess we'll find out as something comes up. Those were the comments I had. Are there any member comments? Anything on the Southdale group? I mean, we kind of touched on it tonight, but if anyone wants to give a little more update. I unfortunately haven't been able to make many. I've been out of town the last few weeks. I think they've mostly been on Thursday night. And it was canceled this week, right?
Correct, because of our planning commission
right
tonight.
now,
Right.
yeah.
So our next meeting will be a week from tonight, on the 19th. Thursday, correct.
The Southdale group.
Also, as a reminder, a week from yesterday, next Wednesday, we have our joint meeting with the planning commissions from Richfield and Bloomington. That will be at the senior center starting at 6 o'clock. I'll send out a reminder.
That'd be great. I think it was on my calendar, but
Pardon me?
Transportation study dates.
Yeah, can,
Date for the joint meeting with the Transportation Commission.
I think we might have, and I don't know it off the top of my head. I'll send out an email to the group.
So next week is the big convene week, really the kickoff, the public kickoff of the Grandview Transportation Study.
isn't that Wednesday night too? Or is that?
That's the public hearing, the alumni meeting, but they're also doing an update to the City Council and the Transportation Commission next week. Since we're not in session, we're going to try and we're going to be on the agenda with the consultants at the Transportation Commission.
Yes, and that's the one I don't
That's the
know
one
the
I
date
can't
of.
remember exactly when, but that's next
I
week.
guess I did see the alumni one, and maybe that's what I was thinking of on Wednesday.
But that meeting will be where the consultants, including the ones from out of town, will actually be in the meeting to give an update. So.
Okay. I'm an alumni, just like probably a lot of people are too. So. Commissioner Forrest?
So are we're hosting that joint meeting then. I don't know what the agenda is for that meeting, but I think it would be kind of interesting to have maybe people from the Greater Southdale Project and things like that. Some of the special things that we've done over even just a few sentences, just to talk about some of the things that we're doing to address planning issues, and maybe they're doing something similar, maybe not. And well, even Valley View Wooddale, just a few minutes on that too. It's just that just to report on it.
Yeah, so the agenda, since we haven't done it in a few years, for those new commissioners, we typically get together all the commissioners, the staff liaisons to each of the group makes a short presentation, maybe 5-10 minutes, that just highlights all the development projects that have happened over the past year. So we get an idea of what's been going on in their cities. They get an idea of what's going on here. And sometimes we have a topic that we'll discuss. Sometimes we've had a work session where we have a special speaker come in on a topic. For this one, I think it would be appropriate for, I'll present all the development projects, and maybe one of the commissioners who's on the Greater Southdale Area Study give a presentation on how that's going, how it works, something like that.
And I would, project is fine, but I'd like, and maybe we can put on there, is there a hot topic list or something, or, what are, I would say residential development here and Southdale are probably two of the ones, or what's going on in the other areas. Projects is one thing that's a result of that, but what are the overriding, issues with the city or cities that they're seeing, or development challenges or trends? How can we, how can we add those in there too? I mean, does that make sense? I'd like to understand those also. So, that's to me is part of the learning effort, is what are they running into, or lessons learned also. Commissioner Carr.
Well, one topic we may want to hear from them about is density. How do they handle density? Has density been an issue for their city? How have they handled it? I would assume they might have similar issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are both excellent suggestions. I'll send out an advance email to the other cities and ask them to kind of be ready for those questions.
I would almost, just as part of the quicken, presentation, it doesn't have to be a big discussion, but just here's the top 5 things we've been dealing with, or top 5 trends or something like that.
Actually, the meetings that I enjoyed the most and found the most useful were the ones that somehow we were encouraged or given a generous opportunity to interact with the people from the other cities, because
less formal.
It was kind of on top of the formal part too, but you really got some good down and dirty conversation about what was going on, what the challenges were, and it was a comfortable setting. So whether it was breaking out into small groups or whatever, so if there's some way of...
I'd say, is there a, part of it is just literally a roundtable discussion or something. And
we usually have food and
topics. I mean,
chat
you're
with
gonna
people
have food
then,
anyway,
but,
so just as just as some thoughts. What did you say about food?
I said good idea.
Oh, good idea for food. Gotcha.
One other thing, too, is I know we have stuff on our work agenda for 2016. It might be interesting to revisit some of those topics to see if we can have some discussion. One of the items is lighting, I believe, and it would be interesting to hear if they're looking at changing their lighting ordinances, again, in view of the trend of some cities to reduce lighting in the evening. It's both energy efficient. That's the primary reason, but I don't know what else is on our work agenda for 2016. If there's any other topics that would be conducive to conferring with the other cities. Think about that, Carrie.
Sure.
Anything else? Any staff comments, Carrie?
Just to update on the last council meeting, the Bank of America was before the council at their last meeting. And they did...
Read the comments in the Sun Current if you want.
Oh, that's right. Yes, it was in the
That
paper
was out today, I see.
Yeah, so...
You can tell us the version too. But.
Yeah, so the quick version is the council was not supportive of the project and authorized staff to come back with findings for denial. It was a 3-2 split, so we have prepared those for next week. However, the applicant, Bank of America, will be asking the council to delay their denial to January. What they would like to do is relocate the drive-through to meet setback or located behind the building. So that's number 1. And 2, shift the building so it meets the setback, so there would be no variance for the building or the drive-through. And then they're reconsidering some of the building materials. Maybe changing out some of the stone, consider Edina limestone, something like that. So that will be on the council's agenda for next week.
They're doing all that to the flagship location?
Yes.
Okay.
Are they, as part of the discussion, are they talking about increasing their leasehold on the site, or is that?
Potentially, that's up to the property owner, because the shift, and that's partially why they need to delay to January, is they need to negotiate that with the landowner.
So I suspected.
That's it for me. The other was just a reminder of the work session next week.
Okay. If there's nothing else, I would take a motion to close.
Second.
Motion second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you in about a month from now.
Oh,